Chairman, you haven't got your microphone on.
Hello, good morning everyone. This is Councillor Simon Christopher. I'm the chair of the Dorset Council Western and Southern Area Planning Committee. Hello, good morning and welcome. Welcome to this July meeting. The Council has suspended face-to-face meetings since the introduction of the COVID-19 regulations. The new regulations now enable decision-making processes to continue in accordance with government guidance on social distancing, and this meeting is being conducted under the new rules for remote meetings following changes to the legislation. A recording of the meeting will be available following this meeting. Members, if you could please mute your microphone if you are not speaking, with the exception of myself and the Vice Chairman, David Gray, and presenting officers. Please also turn off your video unless you are speaking. Please use the chat function, members, to let me know when you wish to speak. And I would invite the members and officers to state their name each time they speak, unless introduced by myself. So, we will now have a roll call of members. I understand that every councillor is actually present, with the exception of Louis O'Leary, who has sent his apologies. So I think we can reasonably move on from there. Declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest in respect of the business that we're going to undertake this morning?
Yes, Chairman.
Hello, good morning, Councillor
Dean
John-Steve. Yes, good morning.
Good morning. It's in relation to item 5C, to the land or the road at the Wessex roundabout.
Oh yes, this afternoon, yes.
No, third one this morning.
Right, sorry, yes, this morning, yes.
Last time this came to committee, I took no part in the discussion or the vote due to my predetermination. My position hasn't changed, so I will not take part in the excuse me, discussion or vote. That's item 5C, Wessex roundabout. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for your clarification. Do we have Councillor David Shortell?
Thank you, Chairman. Again, for the purpose of transparency, I would like to declare a perceived determination on item number 5C, as previously mentioned, which is WP 1700834. In that at the meeting on the 20th of February 2020, I seconded the proposal to refuse the proposal because it was against paragraph 91A of the NPPF, and that the proposed crossing cycleway pavement gave concerns for a wider issue of safety. The application was deferred to allow better understanding of the proposed crossing, and even though the applicant has not submitted any additional information or amended information or plans, I have been advised that I should not participate in the debate and I will not vote on the proposal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for your clarification, Councillor Shortell. Members of the public wishing to speak to the committee had until 8:30 on Tuesday of this week in order to register. So our first planning application this morning, we will do it in a second, but before we do that, we will come back to the question of the minutes of the previous meeting, which have been circulated. Does anybody have any additions or amendments to those minutes?
Chair, Councillor Nick Ireland, I think, wishes to speak. Thank you.
Councillor Ireland. Hello, good morning, Councillor Ireland.
For some reason my microphone on my headset's not working. Can you hear me now?
Councillor Ireland, yes, good morning.
Hello, yeah. Also, I need to speak about 5C. I'm not predetermined, or this perceived predetermination, but I've had advice from Jonathan Mayer and our solicitor Phil Crowder. The application in front of us actually is out of our realm now. The reason we're discussing this is because the application was deferred for the applicant to come back with the alternative proposals to address the concerns that, to be honest, most of us in the room had. Nothing's changed. It's come back to us purely so we can indicate what we would have decided on the day back on the 20th of February if we hadn't deferred. So we're basically we've adjourned for several months. We're back where we are, and yeah, my position hasn't changed, but neither has the application, and so I don't think I have a problem with taking part because nothing has changed, and we're purely being asked to indicate what our decision on that day, on the 20th of February, would have been, and therefore I'm quite happy to take part.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ireland. Now, as well as the planning as officers this morning, Mr. Rogers, we also have the benefit of Guy Tetley from Highways and Philip Crowther from the legal department. So we will doubtless hear from them when we come to that part of the meeting. Okay.
We've got Councillor Sue Cockins wishing to speak. Sarah Williams.
Sarah Williams, yes. Councillor Sue Cockins first, please.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just a little bit confused now about 5C. Are we because all of us who voted and at that meeting, are we not allowed to look at it because the application is still the same? Or are we waiting? Councillor Ireland's just clarified some things for me, but are we waiting for Phil Crowther, the legal solicitor, to give us advice before that item? I'm just a little bit confused now about because if our position hasn't changed on that, then I will have to say as well. So I am a bit confused by that item now, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cocking. I will invite Mr. Crowther to speak when we actually arrive at point 5C to avoid any doubt and to give any clarification that is required. Councillor Sarah Williams. Hello, good morning, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, hello. I'm in a similar position to Nick Ireland on this, on item 5C, so I look forward to hearing from the solicitor about how we proceed. Okay,
thank you, Councillor Williams. And Councillor Peter Barrow, hello, good morning. Do you have anything to add at this stage, Peter?
No, nothing really to add, but just to say I feel exactly the same as the previous
yes.
spoken.
I thoroughly understand. Right, so we will now move on to the first planning application under 5A, which is application WD/D/20 00583 East Street, Beminster. Demolition of existing bungalow and the erection of 5 dwellings. And our case officer is Darren Rogers.
Chairman, before the presentation, I just need a seconder and a proposer to agree the minutes from the 11th of June, please.
Yes, do we have a proposer?
Yes, I'll propose.
David Gray, seconder.
I'm happy to second it, Councillor Pete Barrow.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Right, so can we hear from Mr. Rogers, please?
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members and members of the public who are watching online. Chairman, I take it you can see the Dorset Council logo before I start?
Yes, indeed, Mr. Rogers.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this is a planning application at 82 East Street, Beminster. It's a proposal, as you say, for the demolition of an existing bungalow and the erection of 5 dwellings on the bungalow and a wider site. This is the site location plan. This is East Street, which is a narrow vehicular highway that leads from the town centre. This is the application site in red as is edged. And as you can see, this is the existing bungalow on the site. There are a number of more historical terraced properties in East Street. There are 2 properties, 54 and 56, which adjoin this kind of southwestern boundary, and there are some more modern, the start of modern dwellings to the east, beginning largely with number 92. And I'll just point out at this stage, I'll come on to it a second again when I do the presentation. Number 92 has a large rear garden that encompasses the whole of that area. It does look as if there's a garage and then the curtilage finishes there, but number 92 does have this portion of their rear garden area. To the south of the site is the allotment gardens. just to the south of this site. And if I go to the next screen, this largely shows the application site in relation to the town centre. So our site is located here. This is number 82. And as you can see, what I've done here, Chairman, is to show you in black. This shows the defined development boundary for Beminster. The conservation area largely follows the same area along the northern part of the boundary of the site, but then just does kick in to take in some of the more historical aspects of the site rather than the more modern housing to the east that's located here. So this is East Street, and then this locates down to the Bridge House Hotel, and then you've got the square for Beminster itself. So you can see where the site is located here. We're outside of the development boundary and outside but adjoining the conservation area. This shows that in just a bit more detail, with the allotments to the south, Hollymore close to the east, which is part and parcel of the more modern urban built form, and then where the conservation area is shown here, this relates more to the more historic form, and the development boundary largely following the rear of these East Street properties, and then the application site of the bungalow is located here, and this is this wider area located here. This shows the aerial photograph, Chairman. So this shows the bungalow on site itself, and you can probably see that the defined curtilage to this dwelling is located roughly where I'm circling here now, albeit that ownership extends to all of this area here, and there have been representations that there is no lawful use of this as garden area associated with the house, which is just a matter of fact. The fact does lie is that the site is outside of the development boundary. 54, 56 East Street located here. The rest of the East Street property is located here, and this property here that I've alluded to earlier has got this wider roughly triangular area of rear garden associated with that house. These properties have got much smaller rear gardens that look out onto this undeveloped site. And you've got the allotments to the south. So this is the proposed site plan. You can see the existing bungalow is shadowed here in black. Access is obviously proposed vehicular access, that is intended to be via the existing vehicular access, which does have some chamfered boundary walls which would be removed, and that would enable a 7.4 roughly metre wide access that leads into the site. A terrace of 3 properties would be located here. Vehicular access would largely follow the rear of 64 to 80 East Street to a parking area, a wider communal parking area here, and then a pair of semi-detached dwellings, plots 4 and 5 in this location here. The reason why these areas have been hatched is largely because of Conservation Officer comments. Bear in mind that East Street has got a modern block of garages here, and it does provide some glimpses to the allotments and the wider countryside beyond. And conservation officers were keen to try and retain that aspect and vista, and hence the development proposal being located on this portion of the site rather than come into block here. And then you've got this pair of dwellings here. 54 and 56 are built up to the boundary of the site, and there is a small copse of bushes and trees which are intended to be retained, albeit incorporated into the rear gardens of number 4 and 5, where with separation distances as set out in my report, Chairman, and separation distances from the rear of these properties to the front of these properties also as set out in the report. There's been a representation from number 92 that has this extended garden area here, and there's a little pond, domestic pond located here, and the concern of unduly dominating, overbearing impact in relation particularly to plot 1. But in my view, Chairman, there are no windows located on this east elevation to affect neighbour amenity, and at first floor, roughly in this location, are or is a window to bathroom, ensuite, toilet facility, which will be obscure glazed, and therefore no significant harm to amenity of this neighbour, again, in my view, Chairman. The proposal also includes this area in blue, which is land also controlled by the applicant, and this is a proposed pedestrian access. You'll see from comments from Highways that they're requiring details of that prior to any occupation of those or of these dwellings, should permission be granted, in order that occupiers here have got the ability to walk along here and back into towards the town centre. So there's secondary pedestrian access that's proposed, located between number 62 and number 64. It just shows some photographs, Chairman, of the existing access. This is that chamfered walled access, which will be removed. There's the existing bungalow, which is set back from the more historic character of buildings at back of Highway. And this shows East Street again. It is a narrow street, there's no denying that. It does have many parked cars parked on the highway, particularly on this side, and you can see that from both of these photographs. This is the application site, which shows the bungalow located here. It's gable wall. That's the allotments to the south. Over here you've got 54 and 56 East Street, and this is the kind of open nature of this grassland area. And again, swinging around in terms of photographs, there's 54 and 56 East Street. And as we swing around, these are then the rears of the East Street properties. There is a more modern house here, sandwiched in between the more historical traditional cottages. This is looking towards the side of the existing bungalow and the rear of East Street houses. So that's the side of the bungalow where access, you can just see the car for the bungalow or the vehicle just located there. And then this is the start of the rear of the East Street dwellings. This is the rear of number 60 to 68 East Street that you can see. This is the rear of 64 to 66 East Street. You can see that they are set at a slightly lower level. There's a boundary wall located here as well to the application site, but primarily the first floors of these dwellings look out onto this site. There's a lower outlook level from the ground floor of these properties. And this is the rear of numbers 54 and 56 East Street. So this is those two cottages perpendicular to the main East Street property. You can see the gable of the bungalow and the wider garden area here, and this is that kind of copse wooded bushy area that's intended to be retained as part and parcel of this scheme. This is the rear of number 68 East Street and the garage block, the modern garage block that's in East Street, and I was talking to you about trying to keep the vista. You can see the one vista to the north there, and trying to keep a vista to the south as a result of the proposal. That's the more modern house at number 68 East Street. And again, this is the rear of numbers 70 to 80 East Street and that garage block located there. So that property is on the other side of East Street. These are the rears of 70 to number 80. And then we're actually in East Street ourselves. So this is from East Street and the garage block. This is that more modern house. And then you've got the garage block located here. The access is located just up here, Chairman. You can see the bungalow located there. This is that modern garage block in East Street. And then we come to the rear garden of number 92. You can see the bungalow that's located here. And this is that domestic corner that's got this domestic pond, summer house and sitting out area here. So that summer house is this summer house here. That little portion there, Chairman, is the gable, or part of the roof, should I say, of the host dwelling that's intended to be removed. But as I explained earlier, this property, this is not the only garden area. They do have a much larger garden area, and this shows the other properties here to the between 92 and the application site itself. Back to the proposed site plan. I've indicated where access is intended to be. This is also intended to show some bin storage areas that's proposed at the rear of number 86 to be located here. And we've got, as I said, the car parking, which is 14 car parking spaces in total. This is the proposed front and rear elevations, Chairman. So this is, if I just go back, this is blocks or the terrace of 1 to 3. So this is number 1, number 2, number 3. It's intended to be 1.5 story high. We had a previous application which was withdrawn pending scale, mass scale and dominating impact concerns. So we have tried to work with the applicant to get the scale reduced to be a bit more domestic, diminutive in scale, given the domestic scale of the East Street properties. So we've got dormers largely and space within the roof with windows and headers and doors. And this is the rear of number 1. So if I just go back here, Chairman, this is number 1 itself. And the rear of that will have this as a very small and narrow window located just here in relation to the amenity impact on number 92 and that domestic pond summer house area that I mentioned earlier. In relation to the floor plan, Chairman, if I just hone in on that again, that's this ensuite bedroom here at plot number 1. So each of these plots will have living and kitchen dining with utility toilets at ground floor level, 3 bedrooms and a bathroom ensuite for the master at first floor level for each of those dwellings. Side elevations, no windows, given the aforementioned impact on neighbour amenity. And this is the front and the rear elevations of plots 4 and 5, largely following the same theme with stone coins. And the architectural detail of dormer windows, headers, doors, etc. Each of these 2 properties will have 2 attached garages. And again, kitchen, living, toilet, utility downstairs with 3 bedrooms, the ability to have a 4th, but that 4th could also be a study. So it could be 3 bedrooms and a study, working from home, or 4 beds, each with an attached garage. The side elevations of these will incorporate an obscure glazed side window at first floor level, effectively to accommodate the bathroom you can see in either elevation here, and then you've got the garage pitched roof. There's going to be some cross sections now, Chairman. So we've got a cross section along AA, which is East Street, a cross section largely through the site, BB near the access, and then a cross section CC, which is located there, looking across that cross section. And they accommodate these cross sections. So that's the existing situation. So that's looking from East Street. So there's the existing bungalow. Applicant has picked up the eaves and the ridge line of the properties and the garage block in East Street. So that shows where the existing bungalow is. I don't want to labour too much, Chairman, on this withdrawn scheme, but what you can see here is the scale of the built form of development that we got the applicant to withdraw because we felt that was too large and too big. But this is the scheme that you need to concentrate your minds on, which is this proposed scheme, which shows the existing East Street properties. And then you've got the plots 1 to 3 located there and plots 4 and 5 on a slight angle just located there. And you can see the respective heights of roofs and eaves in relation to what is proposed in terms of those cross-section drawings. This is the section BB. So this is East Street. These are the East Street properties. And these show the gable wall of plots 1 to 3. And then set way behind that is the pair of 4 and 5. and then you've got number 54 and 56, which are located in East Street, perpendicular to East Street, just located there. And this is the cross-section CC from the kind of southwest area. So again, East Street is located here. That's number 64, picking up the height of 64. And then you've got the rear of plots 4 and 5 located there. External materials, Chairman, is proposed to be rendered with natural stone quoins and lintels in limestone of Hamstone to reflect materials used in the surrounding properties, and the windows with white frames, front doors with a wood effect, again seeking to reflect the cottage or the cottage feel of adjacent properties. This shows that bin store again, Chairman, in a bit more detail. So bin storage is located here in order that any refuse vehicle has a temporary pull up here to collect bins in this location here from these properties. And there are 14 car parking spaces, 1, 2, 3 parallel to the rear of the garages, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 for the garages, 13, 14 for extras here. So there are 14 parking spaces, and then you've got the pedestrian access that's proposed that's linked here. Chairman, as is set out in the report, you'll see that we continue to have a housing land supply. The MPPF says that we should be approving sustainable development unless there are consequential adverse impacts that outweigh the presumption in favour of development. And bearing in mind where this site is, it's immediately adjacent to the DDB of Beminster, immediately adjacent to the conservation area, and you'll see from the report the conclusions I've reached on the impact of those. You'll also see what I've said about the design and scale and the impact on neighbour amenity, and clearly there will be a change as a result of the undeveloped nature of the site, but I don't think that that amenity impact is a significant one. And then there's been much talk and much discussion and many representations, Chairman, about highways and the issue associated with a previous planning refusal in 2015 to the north of this site, which was for one dwelling, which was dismissed at appeal. But your highway officers, who will no doubt talk more than I, and I've set out in the report their detailed response, and another typical example of an appeal decision given the direction of travel, pardon the pun, in relation to an appeal inspector's decision on Portland for 3 dwellings where a narrow access was proposed there, and the issue that the inspector had in regard to that, which could equally be applied here, is the issue of severity. And the MPPF talking about severity of harm to highways. So I've set that out in the report, Chairman, and because we've got no highway objections, you'll see why I've concluded that. Biodiversity, Chairman, there is a response we've had from Natural Environment Team, which is listed in your papers, which talks about the fact that we will see an element of semi-grassland lost in relation to this wider site. But there is a mitigation proposal, and that will also come part of a financial contribution that's set out in the report of just over £4,000 to use and compensate elsewhere. And of course, the site will also be, or the proposed development will be, still liable as well. So, Chairman, given all that and the merits for and against, bearing in mind the MPPF and the housing land supply issue, I've concluded that the scheme is acceptable, and there are no significant consequential harmful adverse effects that outweigh that presumption in the favour of development, bearing in mind where the site is in relation to the DDB, and hence the recommendation in your papers, Chairman, for the application to be delegated to the head of planning, given the requirement of the 106 agreement for ecology matters, and subject to the conditions listed, which are set out on my slide, which is the standard 3-year commencement in accordance with the plans list, facing materials of roofs and walls, etc., soft and hard landscaping scheme, the biodiversity mitigation certification approval being carried out. There's highways about provision of access and retention of parking, submission of approval of details of the secondary pedestrian access prior to any occupation, provision of the temporary refuse storage areas prior to occupation, a construction traffic management plan to ensure that if permission is granted, we have details of site construction operatives and parking, etc. Details of the electric plug-in facilities for parking, the reporting of any encountered land contamination when on site, and the provision of the certain windows that I mentioned to be obscure glazed to a minimum obscurity level 3. There's also an informative from Dorset Highways, which is a standard informative, Chairman. So on that basis, Chairman, the application is recommended for approval, and I will leave the proposed site plan now on screen. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Rogers. Thank you for your presentation, and indeed thank you to all the officers who are taking part today and those producing the meeting behind the scenes. Now, can I just clarify with Councillor Kate Weller that Kate was able to listen to all of Mr. Rogers' presentation?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Yes.
I know you had technical issues, and I see that you did have technical issues, but were you able to view all of Mr. Rogers' presentation? That's my one question that I want answered.
Yes, I was.
Okay, thank you ever so much. Good. Now, the committee has received a number of written representations submitted in accordance with the amended speaking protocol for planning committee meetings. These would now be read out by an officer who will introduce themselves, who is not involved in the application. And the representations will be taken in the following order: objectors, supporters. We will then hear from local ward members and representatives of town council, etc. We will also hear from the applicant and agent as applicable. So could I introduce the officer, who is Chelsea Golidge, who's going to read out the representations. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The first representation is from Fiona Laidlaw-Smith. Objection to the above plan application. Briefly, I am extremely worried about my house, number 80 East Street, Bedminster. The corner nearest the entrance to number 82 was knocked a few months ago by a lorry driver driving straight down East Street, trying to negotiate between my house and cars parked on either side of the road outside their houses quite illegally. Lorries entering or exiting number 82 will have much more difficulty if they head to or from Whitcomb Road, the B3163, along East Street. There is no pavement between number 80 and the houses opposite. Pedestrians sometimes have to take refuge in the doorway of number 80, even when cars are driving up or down East Street. Please do not pass this plan application. The next is from John Teasdale. I've lived on East Street for almost 40 years and seen some big changes in traffic and parking. This application will only exacerbate an already very difficult situation. The current local plan has been mindful of this and identified sites well away from the old parts of town. Applications to build new houses in East Street have been resisted on one occasion for a single dwelling next to number 35, with better access than number 82. 4 houses were approved on the Brit, but only after part demolition of a building. The access prior to demolition was better than number 82. More recently, the request to build 3 houses beyond East Street, but using the street for access, would only be considered by Highways with the introduction of a traffic management scheme citing safety grounds. Matthew Powles wrote to locals saying that such a scheme would require public consultation. The opening to number 82 could not be at more dangerous location, and yet no mention of the need for traffic management. So what makes a street deemed by the authority to be unsafe without a scheme suddenly safe? The MPPF guidelines would appear to have been taken to relax the safety requirements. This cannot be the case in any way. The 2015 view mandating the need for traffic management must have considered the situation potentially severe. By means of a comparison, section 16.26 draws the members' attention to a proposal at Portland where, and I quote, arguably the access width and visibility is worse than the proposed on East Street, unquote. The highway width at number 82 is 4.97 metres and the equivalent at Portland is 19.2 metres. I'm not sure what the point is meant to be. The report does not pay enough attention to the future and in particular climate change and heavy rainfall onto a surface which is largely clay. The cottages on East Street look particularly vulnerable. Cramming extra houses into an unsuitable site when over 100 houses are earmarked elsewhere in Beminster makes no sense to local people, especially as they are not affordable. Please listen to the Town Council. The next is from Chris Cheney. The Highways Authority has ignored the impact of incremental traffic generated by the proposed development elsewhere on East Street, despite many representations highlighting this issue. Their assessment and submission focus only on hazards in the immediate vicinity of the site access. Further, the applicant has provided no information on expected traffic generation and vehicle movements, let alone any plan to mitigate their impact on East Street, nor has it been requested by the authority. East Street is one of the oldest areas of Beminster, a narrow residential road with many houses opening directly onto the highway and very limited off-street parking for residents. Since June 2015, the authorities accepted that traffic movements on East Street are precarious and hazardous for residents and other road users. It has consistently recommended refusal for every application for any new dwellings in the vicinity of East Street, on each occasion 4 applications for 1 to 23 units, saying, the residential development proposal will generate further traffic and pedestrian movements along East Street, a county highway with variable and limited carriageway and footway widths. In the absence of the construction of or programme for a detailed improvement scheme designed to provide suitable and appropriate traffic management and safety enhancements for this street, this development would be likely to cause danger and inconvenience to all highway users. In other words, the authority accepts that any additional traffic on East Street will have severe residual cumulative impacts on the road network, which, as they helpfully point out in their submission, is a sound reason for refusal. This position was also upheld by the planning inspector when a refusal for one of these applications was taken to appeal and subsequently dismissed. He even cited NPPF as a reason, adding that, I acknowledge that existing development has taken place alongside Hollymore Lane, which utilises East Street for access. However, the evidence is also clear that further development requires resolution of highway and pedestrian conditions on East Street. It is puzzling why such a clear and well-evidenced highway safety issue has been deliberately ignored for this particular application. Should approval be granted, not only would it be in ignorance of the severity of its impact on the safety of road users in East Street, but it would also be in direct contradiction to the authority's substantiated position for the past 5 years. It would also challenge the soundness of previous council decisions to refuse such applications. This application as submitted should be refused on these grounds. The next is from Mike and Carol Tolman. We object to this development for the following reasons. Members of my family have lived in our property, 54 East Street, since approximately 1960, and the field behind us has always been a field scrubland and never used as an extended garden. This would mean a change of use which, to my knowledge, has never been authorised. This development would be outside the defined development boundary, and therefore the field should be protected from development as it is part of the wider green network within Beminster, providing varied wildlife habitat. The proximity of the development to our property, 54 East Street, will be detrimental to us as we have windows in all rooms overlooking the proposed development. We will be severely affected due to increased noise pollution, loss of privacy, loss of light, etc. East Street is a narrow street which only has limited pavements. The part from 58 East Street to the turn-in into Woodswater Lane, which included the reposed access to the development, has no pavement, and there would therefore be much greater risk to pedestrians, accidents, etc. Also, East Street can get very congested due to heavy lorries and tractors from local farms, waste collection lorries, delivery vehicles, etc. This development would only exacerbate the situation and cause more problems with parking, visibility, accidents, etc. With reference to the further information that's been sourced, it is clear that the proposed site is definitely in the conservation area, and the track along the back of the site to the east is subject to the warning status of EA surface water risk depth 0.1%. This means there will be a much greater potential risk of flooding to properties surrounding the proposed development site, including ours 54 East Street, which is adjacent to the site if this development goes ahead. We hope you thoroughly look into our above points before making your decision. The next is from William Dixon. The statement from Highways would suggest there is no problem with the proposal, but for the residents of East Street and surrounding area who experience using the street every day, there is demonstrated by the numerous objections to both this and the withdrawn proposal. The traffic survey carried out in 2013 showed traffic speed in the vicinity of the site was not always below the prescribed limit. It's 30 miles per hour safe in an area where there are no footpaths and front doors open directly onto the narrow carriageway. Highways have failed to examine the effect of removing the parking that currently takes place directly in front of the proposed access, which would result in increased traffic speeds. The speeding up of the frequent HGVs that serve the 3 farms on Hollymore Lane has not been considered, or is the parking to remain and inhibit the access? It cannot be argued both ways. The alterations to the access are claimed to maximise visibility displays, but this is not the true, and a simple drawing would demonstrate this. No sightlines or vehicle manoeuvring drawings have been submitted. The fact they are not presented is, I would suggest, evidence that the drawings would not support the highways case. Traffic has increased in recent years, so too has the damage by vehicles to front doorsteps. Recently, a vehicle drove over my front doorstep, shunting the food waste bin along the street. There are numerous doorsteps already damaged by vehicles. Some doorsteps have small pedestrian bridges over traditional historic stone drainage channels. These features are specifically referred to in the conservation area appraisal as a conservation asset. These too will suffer more damage, but they are given no mention in the conservation officer's report. The development will do nothing to improve matters. The absence of any benchmark for the site levels is a real problem. Without this, it is impossible to know at what level the buildings are in relation to everything else. The levels between the building plots as shown would indicate a difference in level between the equivalent to a 4-storey building. The difference between the plot levels and the Ordnance Survey levels shown on the drawings are beyond 4 stories. Is the officer's report 6.7 inaccurate or misleading? Levels are fundamental to all planning applications, though their effect substantial. This application makes particular show of reducing levels as a key part of the design to attempt to mitigate its negative impact on existing properties. But what are they? The old stone cottages around East Street do not all have modern DPCs and DPMs, and they're habitatably susceptible to any increase in surface water levels. The application should be refused. The next is from Martin Waters. It is disappointing that the apparent numerous inaccuracies, errors, omissions and unsupported assertions in the application have not been addressed during the scrutiny process, e.g. the Biodiversity Appraisal Protocol Plan certificate has been issued based on a report that stated there were no ponds within 250 metres of the site, despite my 2 large ponds being within 5 metres. It appears the MPPF is being used to promote the application and ignoring the numerous sections of it that is also meant to protect the character and nature of our surrounding in the community. I trust as our elected representatives, you will take a more balanced view in deciding what is acceptable. The following I suggest are unacceptable. The proposal is to develop an area that is mostly a field and not garden outside the defined development area and will negatively impact both the character and appearance of the conservation area. Most houses adjoining the site sit 1 storey lower than the ground level of the field and will have their residential amenity adversely affected by reason of overlooking, loss of privacy, overshadowing, loss of light, noise, fumes and existing views. The amended plan does not resolve these issues as the accuracy of the drawings is being questioned when compared to Ordnance Survey, which show an ever greater difference in levels. The development will be overbearing and again drawings appear to be misleading and missing any benchmark for the site levels. I am particularly concerned with plot 1, which would have an adverse effect on the residential amenity of our garden, 92, by reason of overlooking, loss of privacy, overshadowing and loss of light. The officer's declared orientation of plot 1 is not totally correct in my opinion. The gable end would be facing some of our garden, but the rear would see over the ponds, wildlife sitting areas and greenhouse where we spend most of our time. In addition to the obscure glazed bathroom window, there is a bedroom window within 1.2 metres of bathroom window, which will have a clear line of sight into the wildlife sitting area of our garden and greenhouse. We have spent years developing this wildlife sitting area and our enjoyment, mental well-being and the welfare of the wildlife will be detrimentally harmed by the closeness of the new houses. Despite the many objections, should you feel inclined to give approval, please make it a condition that developer finance public consultation takes place and that an appropriate traffic management and safety enhanced scheme is approved by Plan and Highways together with Bedminster Town Council. Also, both rear upstairs windows of plot 1 to be obscured glass. Please refuse the application for the good of the many. The next is from Pat Waters. The officer in 17.17 appears to dismiss my loss of amenity by stating I have an extensive rear garden area. I presume the inference we go and use another part other than the large area that is going to be overlooked and hence loss of privacy. So I presume he would suggest I move my greenhouse, ponds, seating areas, summer house and planting areas. The officer's estimate of plot 1's orientation in my opinion is incorrect and the bedroom window will clearly see into my sitting areas. The officer states each application has to be considered in its own merits, but then quotes the inspector on an appeal for 35 Eastern Street, but does not mention that the application was refused. In my opinion, that application can't be compared to this one, as there are material differences such as pavement, no pavement, and the two streets are different in physical nature and by types of vehicles using them. Highways assume that the arrangement of the access ensures slow speeds to be used when approaching the site. This is a seriously flawed theory. The majority of vehicles passing my house, 92 East Street, at the start of East Street from Hollymore Lane, and in particular HGVs, do so at 2 or exceeding the speed limit. To exit the site and see around the corner, the vehicle's front end will be in a direct path of oncoming vehicles, which will not have sufficient braking distance to stop or space to avoid. This is a severe safety issue. The proposed site, though only adding 4 more units, doesn't tell the true story of the danger to the inhabitants and visitors of East Street. If you survey East Street when people are at home, 80% of East Street is single track due to parked cars, which also overspill into Woodswater Lane and Hollymore Lane beyond the junction of Riverside. It has been previously agreed by the experts that East Street couldn't handle any more capacity, no matter how small. Also, the proposed junction is potentially very dangerous, as there are normally parked cars opposite. Cars leaving Woodswater Lane do so on the wrong side of the road due to parked cars. It is probably the most dangerous junction in Bedminster. In addition to occupants, visitors and deliveries, people will go down the proposed new cul-de-sac looking for car parking spaces, and if not successful, will have to come back out and turn right to park in Hollymore Lane. This could easily cause an increase of traffic movement out of the site entrance to increase by a factor of 60 times what it is now. Please refuse the application. Save lives. The next is from Melvin Warner. The proposed houses are to be built outside the defined development area. This area was excluded from the local plan and its latest revision. This indicates that there is sufficient land elsewhere in Bedminster to meet the government's requirements of the number of extra homes to be built over the coming years. Thus, allowing these houses to be built outside a defined area may be deemed illegal. It could also set a precedence where an area outside but adjacent to the boundary of development could be incorporated into the neighbouring site within the area and then permission sought to develop, thus circumventing the whole of the planning process. Boundaries set legally should be respected. An area in Hollymore which should have been outside the development area was accidentally included within. As a result, planning permission was given for a dwelling. The legal requirements having to be respected. Similarly, the same applies here. The proposed houses are outside the boundary and so permission should not be given to build, thus respecting the existing boundary. The government inspector made comment in the local plan that future development in the area should be carefully considered because of the level of traffic in East Street already existing at that time. If this application is allowed, it is inevitable traffic flow will increase and so to the danger of all users of East Street. Therefore, I feel this application should be refused. The next is from Ghislaine Warner. The level of danger to pedestrians, cyclists and others that exist in East Street at the moment will only be increased if this application is granted. 5 years ago, the Highways Authority, in their report on the application to build one dwelling at the end of East Street in Hollymore, was that this one dwelling on its own would increase the danger to users of East Street. It is impossible to construct a path the whole length of East Street because of the constraints of the width of the road and the existing buildings either side. In places, there is only enough for one vehicle. The site views at the proposed entrance fall well below the government's minimum requirements for such a junction. Existing buildings would have to be demolished to achieve them. Along with the extra traffic and an unsatisfactory junction would only increase the danger to the public that already exists. It is proposed that the houses are to have soakaways rather than being connected to main drainage. Soakaways at times fail. If this occurs and flooding of the neighbouring houses occurs, who will be responsible for compensating those affected? The council? The site lies on a clay pan and so flooding is not out of the question. Given the above, this development should not be permitted. The next is from Rachel Bowditch. Along with other objectors, I continue to object to this application, having read the officer's report. Planning status of the land. One of my objections relates to the claim in the plan application that the land is an extended garden to the bungalow. Regrettably, the officer's report does not include any information that should be in the possession of the council to confirm this claim. From the knowledge I have, the field has always been of a different planning status and is certainly not an extended garden. I wish to explain why I believe this claim in the application does not stand up to scrutiny of the facts. I was born on 24th March 1931. From that date, I have lived at 60 East Street. I am therefore in a very good position to say what the land has been used for since that date. History of the use of the land. From the 1930s and until after World War II, circa 1946 or 1947, the land was used as a scrapyard business by Mr. Green. Sometime around that time, the scrap was cleared from the field. Around the mid-1960s, a local builder occupied the land and used it for storing building equipment and materials. At some point, a plan application was put in for a house, which was refused by the planning authority. Around 1970, Mr. and Mrs. Miss took over occupancy of the field and ran a riding stables livery business, erecting a stable block on the land. Following a fire in 1978, the stable block burnt down and the business came to an end. The field has been left unused since that date, the grass only being cut once or twice a year. Clearly, the land has been used for various business activities over the time, at least until 1978. Since then, it is laid fallow. Following the erection of the bungalow, aerial photographs show clearly there was a permanent fence around the garden that formed the curtilage of the bungalow. This did not extend into or enclose the field itself. Unless the planning department can show that a certificate of lawfulness for the use of the land as residential land has been granted for the field, the land is not domestic land in planning terms. Despite this specific plan objection in my letter dated 28th of June 2020, this matter is glossed over in the officer's report. The next comment is from Lee and Julie Bowditch. We continue to object to this application. Having read the officer's report, we highlight 3 issues from our letters dated 28th November 2019 and 26th of June 2020. Planning status of the land. The application states that the land on which the new house is to be built is an extended garden. In our letters of objection, we stated our house backs onto this field, which has been for many years, at least since 1931, being a field, not a garden. We are not aware that a change of use from agricultural use to domestic garden has ever been authorised. Research since 22nd of March 2020 indicates that the land does not benefit from being, in planning terms, part of the domestic garden of the bungalow. This appears to be an unlawful encroachment outside the curtilage of the existing bungalow into agricultural land, which the local plan states will be resisted strongly. We can find no evidence that a certificate of lawfulness for the land as residential land has been granted for the land. Photographic evidence provided in our submission and also with Councillor Knox suggests this. Unless the planning department can show that a certificate of lawfulness for the use of the land as residential land has been granted for the land that is subject to the current application, the land is not domestic land in planning terms. The officer's report does not address this point. The committee may wish to question the planning officer on whether the land is truly extended garden and request written evidence of its legal status in planning terms. Development outside the defined development boundaries. The local plan policy SUS2 states outside defined development boundaries, development will be strictly controlled and be restricted to, amongst others, affordable housing. No affordable housing is proposed in the application. The report states that the location is considered sustainable despite being outside the development area. The report para 17.1 gives little reasoning for this compared with greater detail in the introduction to the local plan para 3.1. More consideration to the good progress made with the local plan review, RE Bedminster's housing sites, where para 17.5 of the report should be given higher weight in the committee's deliberations. Loss of amenity and traffic. The report dismisses the many objections regarding loss of amenity without detailed reason. The numerous objections regarding traffic and safety to pedestrians are also dismissed without good reason. Invitation to visit the site. Since March 23rd, site visits by the committee have not been possible. Now that the government's COVID-19 restrictions are eased, we request, given the contentious nature of the application, members defer the decision pending a site visit which can now safely take place. The next comment is from Yvonne Dobson. I trust the elected members who are charged with the responsibility of deciding this application will pay heed to the huge strength of feeling against it, which has been ably expressed in the many written objections. If local democracy is to mean anything, then they must decline this application for the very many good reasons already given. For the safety and well-being of the current residents of East Street and to avoid setting a dangerous precedent of riding roughshod over the local development plan, I urge members to vote this plan down. The next comment is from Christine Bright, who's the Town Clerk for Bedminster Town Council. Absence of 5-year land supply. In the joint local plan review of 2017, the government's target of 775 new dwellings per year for the WDDC/Weymouth and Portland area suggested a formula of 1 new dwelling per 220 residents be used to calculate the supply of 5 years housing. Using this calculation and an assessment of the town's population at 3,140, Bedminster's proportionate allocation would be equivalent to 15 dwellings per annum. Since the present local plan was adopted, 213 dwellings have been completed, partially built or have been approved in Beminster. Therefore, by these calculations, the town already has over 14 years land supply. However, at the present time, we need industry more than housing. Outside the defined development boundary. Policy SUS.2.III of the local plan states that development will be strictly controlled, having particular regard to the need for the protection of the countryside and environmental constraints, and be restricted to, and lists 12 bullet points, none of which applied to this development. The Plan Officer's statement in para 3.0.2 states directly contradicts or ignores the principles of SUS.2.III. If a plan and policy is to be of value, it must be upheld. There are no proposals for affordable housing on this site. HOUS 1.I states that the level of affordable housing required should reflect the viability of development land in the local area. Highways objections. In its response to West Dorset's draft local plan of 2012, Beminster Town Council stated the manual for streets would suggest that the narrow confines of East Street with on-street parking, two-way traffic, HGV traffic, including regular farm vehicles, and a major pedestrian route is totally unsuitable for increased traffic usage. The ford in Woodswater Lane would also prevent it being considered as a suitable alternative for access or egress. There have been other applications for small developments using East Street as a feeder road, and all have been turned down. Comments by Dorset County Council's highway engineer on a previous application were that residential development proposals would generate further traffic and pedestrian movements along East Street, a county highway with variable and limited carriageway and footway widths. In the absence of the construction of or programme for a detailed improvement design to provide suitable and appropriate traffic management and safety enhancements for the street, this development would be likely to cause danger and inconvenience to all highway users. Hence, the application would be contrary to policy COM7 of the West Dorset, Weymouth and Portland Local Plan 2015. This was upheld in a subsequent appeal number APP F1230W 16-314-6827 in 2016. That's all the comments. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for reading out those representations. We will now hear from Councillor Rebecca Knox, the Dorset Councillor for the Beminster ward. Please commence, Councillor Knox.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you, members, for allowing me to speak as the ward councillor for Beminster area. How can I follow all those comments? I mean, very significant points have been made to you, but I am going to highlight some of them in more detail, but also some others which I think are very silent in the report that you've been given today. One of those matters is actually, it's in the report itself from the technical officers, a very short paragraph in your report, but your technical section states that the land which is going to be the plan to be developed is actually got greenfield status. Greenfield status needs two criteria to be met before you would even consider passing this planning application. One is unmet housing need, and you've just heard from the Town Council's evidence that actually the area has significant housing development opportunities already. And the other criteria for greenfield development is affordable housing. This is certainly not affordable housing. There's another issue which I think sadly the photographs and the site do not give you an idea of, and that is of the elevation of the site. The elevation is actually, this isn't flat. To the east of East Street, which is where the allotments, if you see on your plan, the allotments, this is undulating, it's coming down, so East Street is actually at the bottom. So the houses that you can see on East Street 60 along to all of them sit at the bottom of a slope and an incline, and the field itself, I understand, will be dug out in order for the elevation of the properties to be sunk into the property, into the field. Now that will only give rise to a flooding issue. If you had the OS flooding picture, which I have very easily obtained, you would see that from the allotment site just beyond, there is flood 1, flood 2 and flood 3 showing. And you will also see, if you have that in front of you, that there is flood 1 along the track area, and you will also see that also shows on East Street itself, running down the area that you can see. This is clay. All the land above East Street and going out into the countryside is clay. The mitigation apparently is for soakaways. Soakaways don't work in clay. The foundations of the properties along East Street are 18 inches at most. And if there was time to show you some more pictures, I think you would actually appreciate the elevation issue is significant. From the site access up to that bungalow there, you would, if you go back to that photograph, see the height difference between the elevation from the street up to that bungalow. And it will make a huge difference to flooding. And where is the Environment Agency report? There is no submission from the Environment Agency and nothing from Wessex Water either. There is an issue with waste, groundwater and sewage matters in the area itself. I'm mindful of my 3 minutes, Chairman. Were you indicating, or may I continue? You may continue. Thank you, Chairman. It is outside of the local development boundary, and there is a reason for that. And the reason is that the properties along the conservation area, and by the way, if you also had the conservation area map, you would see that both accesses are in the conservation area. The site access between 80 and 86 and the property 64, 62, both of those are in the conservation area. And if you look up the criteria for building in the conservation area, there needs to be separate conditions and planning applications for those. But the local development boundary, that is there for a reason, because the East Street and the properties around need that green land to protect it from the significant issue of groundwater and the permeability. There's going to be very, very little permeability on the area that is due for planning. So where is that runoff going to go? There is nowhere for it to go, and it will be a significant amount. The other issue is that there's the silence on the a bit of a red herring comparing a street in Portland to East Street. Again, if you had the two photographs of those streets, you would see that the dimensions of East Street at 4.97 meters. Portland, Eastern, 19.2 meters. A vast difference in the width of those streets. Vast difference. So why that was put in it is beyond me. And there was silence again on you've heard from many residents about the fact that there's a very, very cast in iron objection to other planning applications in the area, just yards away from this area, on the fact that highways would like to see a mitigation for any vehicular access and pedestrian access if any application was to be successful, but it wasn't successful. And when the previous applicants took it to appeal, it was rejected. And in fact, this site never went into the local development boundary because, and the plan, because the local plan inspector didn't feel it should go in. Chairman, you've been very kind and given me much longer than I should have had, so I appreciate it.
I wouldn't say that at all. Thank you very much, Councillor Knox. I think in the circumstances, what we're going to do now is we're going to take a 5-minute break, a comfort break, and we will reconvene at 10:38. If you want to communicate with me in the meantime, please do use the chat box. When we return, we will hear from members. Okay, everyone, if we're now happy to recommence. Okay, everyone, if we're now happy to recommence.
Okay.
So we're shortly going to hear from Councillor Nick Ireland and Kelvin Clayton, but it's traditional that we now give the officer who made the presentation, Mr. Darren Rogers in this case, the opportunity to make any comment on what he's heard in respect of the representations from members of the public or indeed the ward member. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just make two comments, if I may. Firstly, in relation to issues of flooding, drainage, etc., you'll see from my report that there are paragraphs at 17.31 that talk about drainage. Whilst there's been criticism that there's been no Environment Agency response, this is not a site that would require a consultation following via our consultation processes with the Environment Agency, given where the site is in relation to flood zones, and I've gone into various paragraph details with regards to drainage. There is a condition, should permission be granted, requiring details of finished floor levels, and you will have seen from my presentation the cross-section drawings indicating the heights of the building compared to neighbouring properties. The only other comment I'll make at this stage is the issue about access and some criticism as to comparing a site on Portland to this site. The principal issue that I was seeking to get across to members is that my report is not there to talk about the width of East Street compared to the width of Portland, of the street, Eastern Street in Portland. It was to raise the attention of the width of the access of this site compared to the width of the access that we had at Eastern Street, with vehicles emerging in both situations between two existing buildings. And the Eastern Street Portland one was a single access sandwiched between the gable walls of a terrace of properties in a commercial area that granted did have a footpath and then a wide highway, but it was the issue of the width of the access rather than the street access that I was trying to get across as part and parcel of my report, and saying that the inspector's decision on the Eastern Street, he didn't think that the single width access sandwiched between two properties was a severity issue, and that's what I was trying to get across in relation to the severity issue of the access that's proposed between 80 and 86, and not necessarily the width of East Street between 80 and, for example, 73 to 79 opposite, compared to the Eastern Street, which is 19 metres wide. It is a wider street by very nature of it's one of the main streets through Eastern. So if I can just put that across, Chairman, it's the width of the access rather than the width of the street, and the issue of visibility on egress from those accesses that I was trying to talk about in terms of my highway comments.
Yes, Mr. Rogers. I've certainly picked up on the fact that you used the word sandwiched, i.e. the fact that the entrance is sandwiched between number 80 and 86. Can we hear now from Councillor Nick Ireland?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. You hear me?
I can hear you perfectly, Councillor
Okay.
Ireland.
I've solved my microphone problems. I've got several questions, but I'll restrict myself to one. I give my colleagues the chance to comment as well. I would like to ask Mr. Rogers that given all the representations we've heard, and also from Councillor Knox about the history of the site and its status, can Mr. Rogers tell us what the definitive status in planning terms is for that site? I.e., is it residential curtilage or whatever status it is? And given that status, what the impact is on the application in front of us?
Yes, Chairman, I'll answer that question. If I can just get back to the aerial photography, which is this one here. First of all, there is no lawful development certificate that confirms that this is garden land associated with this property. It may well be owned by these people, but as I said as part of the presentation, it's clear in my view that the residential curtilage of this property is largely, you can just about see the scar of a piece of land going across there that I would suggest in historical terms has been the boundary for the rear garden of this particular property. So this land is, as it says in the report, part of the maybe the ownership. If I said part of the garden of this property, I don't think that is actually correct. It's just an open field owned by this property. What does that implication have? It's largely irrelevant. If it's still a piece of open and vacant land, we've got various policies in the local plan about the need to make best and efficient use of land, which is policy EMV 15. The site lies outside the DDB. Everybody knows that. That just doesn't not in itself mean sorry, but no housing, because we have to look at what the MPPF says about the housing land supply and then determine whether there are significant adverse effects, and there may well be, committee may well decide that there are, that outweigh the presumption in favour of the development, where we're trying to provide more housing in sites such as this, bearing in mind that this is one of the larger towns in Dorset Council, compared to the smaller villages where 5 houses could be quite a significant scheme in those villages. So I hope that provides an answer for Councillor Ireland.
Thank you, Councillor Ireland. I'm sure some of you will be Googling the definition of curtilage derived from the French, and indeed the famous case of Dorset County Council versus Dyer as we speak. We will now hear from Councillor Kelvin Clayton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I had originally two questions, of which Councillor Ireland has taken one of them. So the second, it was mentioned at least once in the public comment, or it may have been Councillor Knox's comment, requesting a site visit. Is this technically possible at the moment?
We have the benefit of a great many officers today. I understand we have Guy Tetley available. We have certainly highways officers present, and I would like to hear from them about the possibility of a site visit. And we also have the legal officer, Philip Crowther. So should we start with Philip Crowther, and then we'll hear from Kelvin about the possibility of a site visit? Clearly, a site visit would need to be accompanied by a highways officer, one would have thought.
Chairman, it's Darren Rogers here.
Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, what I'm just doing, Chairman, is I'm just scrolling through my photographs of the site, and because I think that deferring the application for a site visit, you can see the issue that Councillor Knox picked up on about the fact that the existing dwelling that you can see there is at a higher level via the slope of the driveway from the access from East Street, and that shows
Mr. Rogers, would you just mind going back to that slide and keeping it there?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, do continue.
Yeah, sorry. Well, I was just going to go and scroll through the other photographs just to give members a better feel through the photographs of the, so in order to try and prevent a site visit. I mean, if members want a site visit, that's entirely up to them, but the point of this presentation is to give members a feel of the site that we've got. So that shows the bungalow to the left and the part of the gable. It shows the allotments to the south. As I swing to the right hand side, that's the rear of 54 and 56, which is located here. You can see that the site is elevated. You can see that because these properties, as I alluded in my presentation, are at a slightly lower level, such that their ground floors are at a lower level than the application site itself. That's looking back at the gable wall of the bungalow. These are the houses at 80 and 82, just located here. And then this shows, you can see that they are, this particular one property itself and many of the others are at a slightly lower level to this site here. There will be no doubt that the land will be dug out to accommodate the dwellings, but I come back to the cross-section drawings that I indicated as to the impact that would have in terms of the relationship. Again, that shows the rear of East Street, number 64 and number 66. You can see that at a slightly lower level to the application site. So I'm just trying to give members a feel as to what else would you gain by deferring the application for a site visit by looking at these particular photos.
Well, Mr. Rogers, if I can just take you back to that first photo. Mr. Rogers, you previously used the word sandwich to describe the fact that the entrance is sandwiched between the two neighbouring properties. Now, I'll be delighted to hear from a highways officer in a second, and indeed Councillor David Gray and others are wanting to hear from the highways officer. But it does appear to me that even the entrance, the amended entrance, will be narrower than the width of a fairly small, modest bungalow. Do we have that correct? I've got two questions. That's my first question.
Okay, well, that shows the existing Shamford entrance.
Yes, but given the removal of the features to the side, the entrance is still going to be narrower, i.e. there's no splay, is going to be narrower than the width of the modest bungalow. Do I have that correct?
As you can see on screen, this is the proposed site access that will still be sandwiched between the gable of number 80 and number 86.
Again, you've used that word sandwich. And before we hear from the highways officer, you mentioned something about the collection of waste by the Dorset Waste Partnership, and there's going to be an area where the bins are going to be collected from. Can you just highlight that again? Where is the rubbish going to be collected from?
Well, I would guess
not in front of the individual properties, but from the entrance. Is that correct?
I'm afraid that I don't know Beminster on bin day, but what I would guess is that because of all of these properties, that they leave their bins out on the street and the refuse lorry comes along and collects them. So for a short period of time, I would expect that someone from Dorset Waste Partnership collecting the bins, the lorry will park somewhere here for a short period of time, just walk to here, collect the bins, unload them, and away they go.
Yes.
That will be a short inconvenience.
Yeah. So the expectation,
as happens,
expectation is that we've got a constrained site here, and the bins are going to be collected from the top of the site and not from the individual properties, for clarification. And that we haven't heard anything about emergency services either, for that matter. So can we now hear from highways officers, please? Can we hear from a highways officer?
Good morning. This is Guy Tetley.
Please introduce yourself and your title.
Sure, it's Guy Tetley here.
Morning, Guy.
Morning. I'm the engineer for the Western area.
Yeah, we can't actually see you.
Yeah, apologies for my camera. It got damaged on site, so it's. I think I mentioned it last time, but it's not working terribly well. So apologies for that. Well, first and foremost, there's a couple of points that have been raised. By representatives. One to the applications within the vicinity of the site. Now, there's a couple of points I want to clarify on that. Obviously, I look at the site on its own merits, but because they've been raised, I'll cover them. One was for, well, sorry, there have been several applications. One was for 3 residential units. That was at 2834 Hollymore Gardens, I believe. That was withdrawn and a decision wasn't made on that one. There was a decision later on for the same site, but for only 1 residential unit, which was refused with a highways reason on there. That was appealed, and it was actually allowed by the planning inspectorate. And they effectively stated, he found that the proposal would not result in an unacceptable effect on the safe and efficient operation of the highway in the vicinity of the site. So that, again, causes, you have to get that into consideration. Another application which was referred to, which was I think the north of Hollymore Lane, which was for 23 units. Now that was refused, appealed, and dismissed. So that so we got some support there for the approach, how we've dealt with the highway aspect of that. But what that does is it poses a problem, because it talks we have 2 conflicting approaches there from the planning spectrum. But what I think they've done there is they've looked at the quantum of development, i.e. the numbers that are being represented. Now, 23 residential units will produce a significant amount of cars coming along East Street. Circa, I would have thought, 115 to 120 per day, roughly. 1 residential unit, you're looking at about 4 to 5. So on the basis of this site itself, the intensification you're looking at is about 18 to 20 trips a day. So on the basis of the NPPF, trying to say that this would represent a severe harm, it's very hard to justify that. And that's why, as I say in my report, I've come to an unbalanced decision, as you can see in my report. You had a comment, I believe, with regards to the bin collection, or a question about that. Yes, I think that what Darren has said is correct, and what occurs for East Street, would continue. This has not been put forward for adoption, this scheme, so bin collection would occur from the street, which is not an unusual approach for schemes like this. Were there any other questions? Sorry.
Thank you very much. So what you're confirming is that the bins will be collected close to the narrow entrance, where Mr. Rogers said the entrance is sandwiched between 80 and 86, yes. Which is what I find interesting.
Yes, that's correct.
We talked about traffic movements, and I'm sure there are other people wanting to speak, but do allow my indulgence. Can you just remind me how many parking spaces there are and how many garages?
So it's 14 total, and 2 of those are garages.
So 14, and you're only expecting about 18 traffic movements. And how distant would you say this is from the main shop in Beminster, which is the co-op, or indeed facilities such as the school? Because that doesn't seem to be a lot of traffic movements given the number of parking spaces and garages.
You're looking at probably less than a kilometre.
What I'm trying to say is I can't imagine people carrying lots of bags of shopping from the co-op in the square to this site.
Okay.
Forgive my naivety.
No, that's fine.
I just question the number of traffic movements.
I mean, this is obviously derived from the TRIX database that we use. It's a standard database, and you're looking at, in the AM peak, you're looking at about 3 two-way trips. And yeah, I mean, it's a fairly standard amount per dwelling.
Okay. Well, in a second, we're going to hear from Councillor David Gray. In the meantime, do we have a sort of larger illustrative map which shows East Street and the more modern bungalows to the right, just so we can really gauge how the road narrows as you come down from the east heading west into East Street? That would be quite useful if we could put that on the screen. So Councillor David Gray, do you have anything to add, because you wanted to hear from Highways?
I do, Chair, but I think Councillor Sue Cockings was before me, so I'll let.
No, David first, then Sue.
No, that's fine. David, you go first.
Okay. I've got a question for Guy. Hi, Guy. Coming to your sort of on-balanced decision, and in the sort of safe and efficient way the highway works in East Street, did you use any accident data? I'm sort of interested. I mean, there's been lots of objections talking about the safety, and it looks very narrow. I'm wondering whether we've got any data that indicates whether it is safe or not.
Yes, I've looked at the accident data for the area. There's nothing occurred along East Street. I mean, the narrowing of it actually helps to reduce the speed that you know that would be occurring along there. So that works in the site's favour. Also, so do the parked cars, because again, that further reduces it. And what you've got just to the, I think it's the east of the site, the road, obviously the Hollymore Lane part of the road is wider, and then it. I think I'm not sure the exact number, but the block of buildings to the east of the site itself, just in front of Woodswater Lane, they narrow down the carriageway there, and they also restrict the forward visibility, which helps to effectively slow vehicles down, and people driving with due care and attention would be, significantly below the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit at this point.
I've got that map on screen, Darren Rogers. This is Chairman.
Yes, I hope that's helpful to members. Clearly, you can see that to the right of the red line, heading up towards the junction with Hollymore Lane close, for instance, it is that much wider than the area with the more traditional buildings. Sue Cocking.
Sorry.
Good morning again, Sue.
Hi, sorry, I just wanted to, Darren's just flicking through some of the slides that I wanted to look at. It was the one with it was right at the very beginning with the boundaries, with the conservation boundary and the development boundary on it.
That's it.
Is that the one there? Yeah.
Chairman, if I may interject.
Yes, please, Mr. Rogers.
The red line is the conservation area boundary. The black line is the defined development boundary. They largely overlap, bar the fact that the conservation area then goes down that access road, Woodswater, I think it is, leaving the more modern housing to the east, as you would expect outside of the conservation area, the more historical part to the west inside. So red is inside its conservation area, black is the development boundary.
Well, there was another one. I think it was a bit more detailed about where the site is, where it had the pedestrian bit and the garage bit, and it had the that one. That was the one. Yeah, sorry, that was the one I just wanted to look at. Yeah. So the blue is the conservation.
No, what you have on screen now is the application site. Right. And the blue area is the pedestrian link that's proposed as part and parcel of the scheme, which is that.
Okay, that's lovely.
And Mr. Rogers, can I ask about that pedestrian link and the certainty of provision of a suitable pedestrian link?
Yes, what's the question?
If this application were to be passed, are we wholly confident that that pedestrian link would be available and meet all criteria?
It's part of the proposal, Chairman, and there's a condition of the recommendation, which is, I'm just scrolling down for the report at the moment, which does require that details to be submitted and approved of that, and for it to be carried out prior to any occupation of the houses. So if it's not provided prior to occupation, people can't live in the houses.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Do we have any other questions?
Yes, Chairman.
Hello, good morning again.
Hello, Chairman. Yes, I am concerned about the entrance and exit. Hold on, put my camera on.
Okay, Councillor Dunseith, yes.
Yeah, as you would go to drive out from the site into East Street, the houses either side, number 80 and 86, go directly up to the road. So when you're in line with those two houses, you can't see the road. Your vehicle has actually got to come out into the road before you get any sight line. And should there be any cars parked along that road on this side of the proposed development, then your vehicle will have to go out even further. So you could be the other side of this narrow street before you've got any visibility, and that does concern me. It is about the sight lines and the safety of exiting the site. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Dunseith, thank you for your comments, and I'm sure it would be good to hear from Mr. Tetley in response to that.
Chairman, it's Darren Rogers. Could I answer that one at all, please?
Yes, indeed.
You'll see in my report, and if I can refer you to, I think it's 17.25, in which I extract, and I'm sorry to hark back to this appeal decision in Easton Street, but again, back to the very point that Councillor Dunseith has made, and it is a valid point, etc. Paragraph 30 of that extract says, this is the inspector speaking, I acknowledge that visibility is significantly impaired, although it is highly likely that vehicles merging onto Easton Street, and in this particular case take it as East Street, would be doing so with caution and at low speeds. I noted these types of manoeuvres at other restricted accesses in the vicinity during my site visit. Furthermore, the wide pavement, which we haven't got here, and presence of the projecting bay windows of neighbouring properties, what was the case there, which we haven't got here, would likely make pedestrians take a wider route along the pavement away from the access. This, in my view, would increase the likelihood of pedestrians being alert to cautiously emerging vehicles, thus reducing conflict. Also, the sound from car engines, which is an interesting point given the direction of travel of electric cars, Also, the sound from car engines would likely be audible and provide pedestrians with an indication that a vehicle is about to emerge from the access and cross the footway, albeit there's no footway in this particular instance. I therefore do not consider the safety of pedestrians would be materially harmed by the proposed accesses. And then he goes on and says, consequently, it would have an acceptable effect on the highway as the proposed access is considered suitable and it's compliant with the policy of the local plan, which requires development not to have a severe detriment impact on road safety. And I think that is the acid test. And I think that's why Guy Tetley from Highways, in addition to the vehicle movements and the trips and the data he's collected, has concluded that the proposal is not an objectionable one from his point of view, subject to conditions about construction traffic management if the permission is granted.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. If I understand what Councillor Dunsteve was saying, and if I could perhaps use my own words, I get the impression she's suggesting that traffic emerging from this site would nudge forward. And I'd like to hear in a minute from Mr. Guy Tetley about whether he would describe this entrance as concealed. And I'm sure we've seen, as we travel around, entrances that are described as concealed, and whether Mr. Tetley would agree this is perhaps a concealed entrance, and surely he wouldn't want to put up a sign on listed buildings saying danger concealed entrance. I do take on board the point about the site visit, and I do question where there is an opening between 71 and 73. That is, I believe, an entrance to a modern site, and that has a wide display that we might be able to see on a site visit. I may have that wrong. So I think we will hear again from Guy Tetley in the near future, but we will now hear from Sarah Williams and then Pete Barrow. Sarah.
Thank you.
Morning.
Could we put up a photograph of the entrance again, please, leading up to the bungalow? Thank you. Well, my first point is exactly what is going to be taken away. Is it the where the fencing is, or is it just for gate posts?
Chairman, the answer to that question, you can see that that's the proposed access, and this is the existing situation. So these walls, this fence, and the pillar here, and this wall and this fence will all be taken away with, and there will be a footpath along here, which is this little footpath here along the one side of number 86. And I think there'll be a very narrow curb that you can see there in order to accommodate that 7.489 width. So at the moment, that visibility display is a bit like that. If I can draw it, if you can see it on my screen, that will all be got rid of, and you'll have that as the new access.
Okay, thank you. I mean, my feeling on this is that those low walls are actually protecting the properties 88, 80 and 84 at the moment, and with that taken away, or sort of, it could potentially cause more problem to the boundary property. My other question is, there have been several mentions that there had been a request for a traffic management plan to be undertaken on East Street, which hasn't happened. I think that was mentioned that it was for 2015. And I know that East Street is a very busy street. It is an incredibly narrow street. And there's mentioned that there are a lot of farm vehicles that use this street, as I have witnessed myself several times driving along this street. Is there any chance that the traffic management plan could actually be undertaken before this development gets permission?
Mr. Rogers, would you like to comment on that?
I think it's one for Mr. Tetley, to be honest, Chairman.
Yep. Shall we hear from Mr. Tetley at this stage? Then we'll hear from Councillor Pete Barrow, then Kate Weller, and then David Shortell. Mr. Tetley.
So at the moment, there's no plans to implement a TMS through here, and again, it boils down to the quantum of development. Like like I mentioned earlier, when you've got 23 extra units going in there, that's a significant amount of trips. You could on balance judge that and say that you could support the TMS, and that's what the planning inspector did. And again, that's with the other site, which was only for one residential unit, that was allowed at appeal because the planning inspector didn't believe that the quantum of development proposed justified a TMS going in. So at the end of the day, like I said, I've taken the balanced decision that 4 extra units coming in and out of here does not support a TMS being implemented for East Street.
May I come back to Mr. Tetley for a moment?
Yes, indeed, Sarah.
The proposal was for 23 properties, which was refused. How many parking spaces do those properties have on their application? Because this application has 14 parking places, which is actually 2.8 cars per household.
I have to confess, I don't know how many spaces the 23 residential units once had. That said, just because there's a parking space doesn't mean that it's going to generate a trip every day. And that's the point, as I mentioned earlier, with regards to the TRIX database. What it does is it works out the likely movements of developments of this sort of nature. And it comes out at, as I say, about 4 to 5 trips per dwelling per day.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Peter Barrow.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's just a question about, to clarify my understanding of this. This is outside the development boundary, so therefore this site should be exemption site. And our own local plan says that any new build housing that's would be built on such a site would be affordable housing. So that's whether Mr. Rogers could sort of just clarify my understanding of why we're allowing open market housing when our own policy says it should be affordable. And the other one is we don't seem to have had an answer yet to the question of whether we can actually have a site visit or not in the current circumstances. Thank you.
Okay, well, we're going to hear from Mr. Crowther shortly. Councillor Kate Weller.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm a bit conflicted by this now because all the discussion so far has been on the entrance between the 2 existing houses, number 80 and 86, until just now, with Councillor Barrow mentioning that this would be an exemption site, and I'm not quite sure why. Although I have to say personally, I think the development looks quite nice, but it's its location that I'm concerned about. In terms of the entrance, I actually lived in a conservation area in a listed property with an entrance from my property which could park 4 cars through a much narrower site, driving a very large car into a very narrow road, and it was fraught with dangers twice a day. And at that time I wasn't driving an electric car, thank goodness, so the pedestrians could hear me coming. But nevertheless, I had to creep out to make sure that I wasn't running over small children as they came past the end of my drive. So that really does concern me, but I think it's a much wider picture. I'd really like to be given more convincing evidence that we should be approving housing that is not affordable outside the development boundary. Because I'm not convinced of that yet, I'm afraid.
Councillor David Shortell.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I just want to query some comments made by Mr. Rogers. He likened the entrance to this particular site to a site on Portland, pointing out that in fact the width of the entrance itself was very similar. But of course, he also went on to say that the width of the road in general is very much greater. Now, that must have an influence on the cars egressing or entering the particular site, because there's much more a space to maneuver, and therefore it's more space in order to ease the car or the vehicle out to see the oncoming traffic. So I can't see how we can liken that to the other development on Portland, when in fact the width of the road in general is very much different. Thank you, Chairman.
Can I come back on that, Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Rogers.
Again, I was trying to get across to members, not about the width of the road itself in terms of the road it comes onto, but the width of the egress and the access to the development site itself. So in the Portland case, a single car was emerging between two gable ends of properties, and it was emerging very slowly onto Eastern Street in Portland. And the inspector there said that people doing that and driving cars will be doing it very slowly and very cautiously before emerging onto Eastern Street, which has wider footpaths and a wider street. The point I'm trying to get members to understand is that in that issue, the inspector, having looked at the MPPF and the policy of the local plan, didn't feel that that would be severe to justify refusal of permission. He then refused the application on other grounds: amenity impact, character of the area, etc. What I'm trying to get across here is that in this situation, the width of the proposed access, not East Street will never change. It will always remain the same width. The width of the access will be wider than what it currently is because of the demolition of the little dwarf walls and the picket fence that you've seen on this photograph. But the vehicles will still be emerging slowly and cautiously in the same predicament as the previous appeal. And on that basis, that would not mean that this issue is a severity one to justify a refusal of permission, which is the same conclusion that Mr. Tetley has concluded with his highway comments. That's the point I'm trying to get across.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Can I ask Mr. Tetley a question again, please, and then we'll hear from Mr. Criver, the legal officer, about site visits. If you can go back to that first photo, Mr. Rogers. Mr. Tetley. Mr. Tetley, can I ask you a question? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hello. Yeah.
Mr. Tetley, I've mentioned previously that this entrance, it has been described as sandwiched. It's been described as narrow, and it's narrower than the modest bungalow. So what we have in front of us is the entrance. We're going to have the small wall taken away under this scheme and the picket fence, but we're going to have a pavement put in, and we're also going to have the rubbish bins that are going to be stored there, and we're going to have potentially 14 spaces. And if we can go back, we're going to have 14 car parking spaces and garages, when previously we probably only had about 2 vehicles there. Do I have that correct? So we're going to have a pavement on the left-hand side as we speak, and we're going to have the refuse for all those houses. Do I have that correct?
The pavement will be on the right-hand side, to the eastern side of the access, and it will have a temporary bin store so that the bins can be left there prior to collection.
So it's going to have a bin store for all those houses?
Yeah, so a temporary bin store just at the point of the cursor now, and that will enable the refuse operatives to come and pick those bins up from that shared point and then take them down, so it minimises the time that they're there for. I think you mentioned earlier though about emergency access, you know, like an ambulance or whatever. The width there will enable a vehicle to turn into the site of that sort of size.
That's on the presumption there aren't lots of parked cars there.
again, you should not be parking close to an access, so you shouldn't be blocking access sites. That's against the highway code. So that's something that when someone's driving with due care and attention, they shouldn't be doing that, basically. The other point that was raised is about the nature of this access. I would take the opportunity to point out that there are several accesses like this within the vicinity of the site.
But would you describe this as a concealed entrance?
No, I
or
wouldn't.
Would you say it's not concealed?
I wouldn't say it was a concealed entrance. Again, this complies with Manual for Streets, which is the document that we use. It's mainly because this is a lower approach speed in this vicinity. I think if this was on, let's say, what's the name of the road? If this access was onto a classified road like Whitcomb Road or something like that, where you were expecting higher vehicle speeds, then we'd be having a very different discussion. But this boils down to the nature of East Street. This boils down to that there are parked cars, there's limited forward visibility, which basically reduces vehicular speeds through this vicinity. Okay.
Okay. I do get the impression that you're minded to say that it's going to make traffic on East Street worse rather than better.
So that
are you going? Is this going to make? I'm going to ask you: is this going to make traffic on East Street worse rather than better?
It will increase traffic on East Street,
won't it? Yes.
By only 20 trips a day, which against the MPPF, I'm not sure you could argue that's severe.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Tetley. Peter Barrow. Peter's wanting to clarification about affordable housing. Do you have anything else as well on this, Peter?
No, it's just a question of why we're allowing new build when our own plan says we should only be putting affordable housing on exception sites. Yeah. So just could Darren give us an explanation around that, please?
I would like to hear from Darren and also Mr. Crowther. And I'm also concerned that we might be allowing building on what might be described as a greenfield site when we actually rejected an application in Watton, where there was an application to build a reduced number of houses, open market houses on a greenfield site, and this committee refused that application. Can we hear about affordable housing? From firstly Mr. Rogers, and then I do want to hear from Philip Crowther about his thoughts on affordable housing for this site, and indeed whether we could have a site visit. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just in relation to the issue of the greenfield nature of this site and exception sites, yes, that is correct. If this was an exception site, then the principle of that would already be established, because that's one of the criteria that's set out in policy, that if you build outside of a DDB, then you can only do that through amongst various criteria, one of which is affordable housing through the exceptions policy. Hence the title, it's an exception to the otherwise policy. The scheme that's been put forward is not an affordable housing scheme. It's an open market scheme, and we come back to the housing land supply position. So we can't just say no because it's not an affordable housing scheme. And I'll come back to the fact that we have granted a number of planning permissions for small residential units on land outside of development boundaries, related mainly to our major towns of Dorchester, Weymouth, etc., and then some of the smaller towns, Lyme Regis. You'll be a knowledgeable chairman of a scheme for 2 houses just outside of Charmouth that was recently approved outside of the DDB because of the housing land supply, where there were no consequential adverse impacts. And of course, the Watton Lane one, yes, was refused by committee. That was contrary to officer recommendation, I believe, and that's what we have here. So, but that's a member decision, and yes. And you know, we'll hear what the members say in terms of making a resolution on this particular application.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. And we do still have a climate emergency. And I'm sure there are some people who are thinking these aren't affordable houses. These are distinctly unaffordable houses. But I'll be interested to hear what other people have to say, starting with Councillor David Shortell.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I just wanted to pick up on a comment made by one of the officers in their presentation just now, in that the refuge storage is only a temporary measure. Now, is that going to be a permanent temporary measure or actual temporary measure? I just wanted to check that. Thank you.
Mr. Rogers?
Yeah, I think the issue about temporary was the fact that the bins are collected and there's a temporary period whereby East Street is clogged up with refuse lorries. The proposal is for bin storage in that area.
Councillor David Gray, followed by Councillor Kate Weller. I invite you both to speak, starting with David.
Questions been answered. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Kate, do you want to talk about highways and double yellow lines, please, Kate?
Sorry, Chairman. It was just I put it there in order to save speaking, but I will ask very quickly.
No, we do like to hear from you.
Okay. It was just that if we, the officer stated that people shouldn't park on junctions. We all know that, but we also know that they do park on junctions, and if they have routinely parked there, they will continue to do so. So is he suggesting that double yellow lines should be put there? If that's the case, then those cars who are parking there at the moment will then be displaced, and they will cause congestion in some, it's a knock-on effect really. So whatever we do has consequences, and we need to think about those things as well, I think.
Can we hear from an officer? Can we hear from Philip Crowther? Do we have a legal officer?
Chairman, it's Phil.
Hello, Phil.
It's Phil.
Can you just clarify the position with respect to our ability to undertake a site visit? That question was asked earlier.
Of course, Chairman. My understanding is that the council's policies on.
Sorry, you're breaking up. Can you just repeat that? Sorry.
Might help, Phil, if you turn your camera off. It might improve the bandwidth.
Okay, Phil, can we hear from you again? Without the camera? Well, what we'll do, we'll hear from Phil Crowther via the chat bar, perhaps. We're not hearing Philip. Does anybody have any other comments to make? Do we have any proposals?
Chairman.
Yes.
I think I would, if we're allowed to, I think I would be in favour of a site visit.
Yes.
Because I think we've looked at the plans and we've looked at the photographs, and it seems to get more and more involved, and we can see complications that maybe we may not have appreciated. So if we're allowed to, I think a site visit would clear our minds as to exactly what is going on this site and at the entrance. Thank you, Chairman.
So we have a proposal for a site visit. We've got a seconder with Peter Barrow. Mr. Crowther, are you back online?
Chairman, I am. Apologies for that. My connection dropped out.
Yeah. So are there any reasons why we shouldn't have a site visit?
I think, Chairman, the practicalities of holding a site visit remain the same now as they have done since the coronavirus outbreak. We'd need to bear in mind our position as a public authority in observing the social distancing rules, and even though central government have relaxed those in a number of circumstances, we would still need to maintain those at a site visit, and practically that may make holding a site visit for the committee particularly difficult, especially on a site like this where the public space and the highway is so narrow. and that may mean that a site visit couldn't be held for some time and that would have a consequential impact on the length.
So you're breaking up again, Mr. Crowther.
Determining this, then that's a decision for members.
Members, does anybody have any comments?
Chairman, if I may make a comment.
Yes, Mr. Rogers.
I mean, I have been at home every single day of my working time since coronavirus outbreak. I do have a health situation personally.
Yes.
So it may well be that I would not want to visit the site for my own personal health reasons, but that will be a member for or a decision for committee, and we'd have to look to for someone else to administer that. But I just come back to this point, which is, you know, I've tried through the presentation and I've got a photograph on screen now that, you know, what we have here is a green field, slightly elevated. We've talked ad nauseum about the highway implications. We've had photographs of the highways, etc. I think members have got a good feel about the East Street narrowness. They've got a good feel about potential impact on neighbours' amenity, the character of the area, and I'm not too sure, albeit I do recognise why members will want to visit the site, what added value that may have. But of course, that's a decision for the members to make.
Okay. So you have used this photo in describing this as a green field. You haven't said within the curtilage of a garden. You said this is a green field. Councillor Clayton, we haven't heard from Councillor Clayton for a while. Do you have any comments?
Other than supporting a site visit, I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that the photographs are deceptive. But the way they've been pieced together to create a panoramic view, I think may be giving me the false impression that the site's larger than it actually is. I noticed there's quite a bit of overlap on some of these photographs. So if they were actually put in true dimensions, it would provide a smaller panorama. Apart from that, I'm on a knife edge whether to approve or reject this application. And at the moment, way I'm going, bearing in mind, without a site visit, in view of the degree of public opinion against it, I would probably go in favour of public democracy and reject.
Chair,
Right.
can I make a proposal?
Yes, Councillor Gray.
Can I propose that we defer a decision on this pending a site visit, and can we go to the vote on that? Thank you.
So we've got a proposal for deferring. Do we have
a second that, Chair?
Second that.
Oh.
Okay. If you want to type in your thoughts, just put in site visit and we'll see how many people are of that opinion.
Chairman, it's Phil Crowther. I think.
Hello, Phil.
So there's been a proposal which has been seconded. So I think if there is going to be a vote on it, it needs to be done in the roll call manner as a normal
Yes, okay.
Vote would be.
Okay, that'd be absolutely fine. So we now have a proposal for a deferral for a site visit. Peter Barrow.
I'm in favour of a site visit.
Kelvin.
I support that.
Yeah, I see that. Going down the list, Sue Cocking.
Yeah, I would support a site visit.
Jean Dunseith.
Support a site visit, Chairman. Support.
Yeah, for the formalities, David.
Support.
Nick Ireland.
Support.
Louis O'Leary isn't here today. David Shortell.
I support a site visit, Chairman.
Councillor Sarah Williams.
I support.
And Councillor Kate Weller.
4.
Okay, so this item is deferred for a site visit for a date to be determined. Thank you all very much, and we will now take a 5-minute comfort break.
Hello?
Okay, so we're now going to recommence with respect to application WD/D 20001014, Creek Caravan Park, Fisher's Place, Ringstead, Dorchester, Station 40 Caravans, variation of conditions. Darren Rogers is the presenter.
Thank you, Chairman. Have you got Dorset Council just to make sure that everything's working?
Yes, indeed, Mr. Rogers.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, this is Creek Caravan Park at Fisher's Place, Ringstead, Chairman. It's an application for the variation of conditions on a previous planning permission that was granted in the 1960s. It's for the variation of conditions 1 and 2 and the removal of conditions 3 and 4, essentially seeking to extend the season period for occupancy of these caravans. If I might start with that, we have had a further, you should have all had an update sheet which includes many representations objecting to the application, including some representations in support of the application, including comments from the Ringstead Protection Society as well. They're all listed on your update sheet. As I said, we've had one further letter that was received yesterday that was brought to my attention this morning, objecting very much on the similar grounds that many of the others objecting about extending the period beyond the current April to October period. Just one further bit for my report, Chairman. The committee report in itself refers to the current 6-month season from April to October, which I automatically thought was 6 months, but if you include the months of April and October, it's actually 7 months. And as is proposed to be extended, what would happen is that would be a period of 4 extra months on top of that, so 11 months effectively. So this is the application site, which is here, Creek Caravan Park. This is Fisher Place to the north, Gully Cottage is to the west, and then there are further residential properties to the west, which I will outline to you on the aerial photograph. So this is the existing caravan park. It has 30 caravans on it. These are the residential properties further out west. This is Fisher Place and the access track that leads to the caravan park and then leads out onto the coastal path. And you can see from this photograph Ringstead and its car park with a field for car parks. This was obviously taken in, I would guess, in the summer months. This is an aerial view that shows the 30 caravans. I've counted every one, and indeed there are 30 on that particular site. This shows Fisher Place, and you've got the coast to the south with the pedestrian stair accesses that lead from the site to the south here, and then you've got the residential dwellings largely to the west of this site. Some more aerial photographs, Chairman, that show the site in its wider context, looking towards back towards Weymouth. This is looking back eastwards, and that's looking back towards Portland that you can see in the distance. So, if in effect, Chairman, this presentation is a hell of a lot shorter than the previous. These are some photographs taken by neighbours who are objecting to the application. This shows Fisher Place, which you can see slightly raised to the accesses that lead to some of the dwellings, such that when you view it from some of the neighbours' property as vehicles go by, they are slightly elevated that you can see. And these are some other neighbouring photos that have been submitted, just showing the state of the coastline to the east of the site. And this stepped access is in effect, I'll just get back to here, it's this stepped access in this bottom corner, so it is beyond the site. They're taken from that particular location, but you can see some of the issues around issues of erosion, but they are beyond and to the east of the site. Chairman, so this is not an application for 30 caravans on the site. The 30 caravans are lawfully there. They've been there since the early 1960s. This is an application that effectively seeks to extend their period of occupation. The report, Chairman, says at paragraph 6 that the planning permission was granted in December 62. it's a bit of an anomaly one because, and as things were with regards to caravans in the 1960s and planning officers in the 1960s, dare I say it, the description of development that people applied for in this particular case in 1962 was to station 40 caravans, and then planning permission was granted, and one of the conditions was you can't have any more than 30 on the site. And developers used to say, okay, thank you very much, we'll make sure that there's just 30. So what was described to be applied for and what were given was chalk and cheese. And it's a bit like these days applying for planning permission for, say, here's my application for a 2-storey house, and the local planning authority going, yep, okay, here's a condition, it should only be a bungalow. In an instance like that, we would refuse planning permission if we felt that the 2-storey house was unacceptable for a whole variety of things: character of the area, impact on neighbours. That didn't tend to happen in the 1960s on some of these old caravan sites. Planning appeared to be a bit more pragmatic, shall we say, and permission applied for X, but permission given for Y, and that's what we have here. So no more than 30 caravans. That's happened, and that would be lawful if a lawful development certificate were to be submitted, given the fact that there are 30 on that particular site now. And one of the other conditions of the permission is that it says the land forming subject to the application shall be used for the stationing of caravans only between the 1st of April to the 31st of October in each year, and then in the periods of November to March they should be unoccupied. So there are no holiday occupancy conditions here either. So someone could occupy one of these caravans from the 1st of April to the 31st of October if they so wished. From a planning point of view, whether the landowner or the site license permits that is separate legislation to the planning aspects of it. And what this permission or what this application seeks to do is to extend that period to incorporate the Christmas period and the half-term February period, so that people would be able to occupy the caravans in January as well as November, and as well as December, incorporating the Christmas period. Chairman, you'll see the representations that were received at the time of writing. Many people objecting to the application about the fact that the occupation of these caravans beyond the permitted period could give rise to a change in the more peaceful, tranquil character of this part of Ringstead, and also including that the comings and goings associated with people using those caravans along Fisher Place could have an adverse impact on amenity of those existing residents, particularly to the west of the site. I think that all has to be balanced, Chairman, with the issues that we've got with regards to not only COVID-19, but the issues related to caravans being more widely used in terms of extended time periods, seeking to benefit the local economy, benefit the rural economy, and benefit various wider trips to Dorset businesses, etc. You'll see what I've said in terms of amenity impacts and the impacts on other issues such as nature conservation. The site's not within the 5-kilometre heathland area, so Natural England have got no objections to the application. And therefore, on that basis, Chairman, not setting aside the further representations that we've received that have come about largely in the last two and a half weeks objecting, albeit we've had some in support of the application, I'm recommending approval as is set out in the report, but subject to, and Phil Crowther may wish to make a comment on this, that we just alter the description of development to not say station 40 caravans and then perpetuate a planning permission that gives something that's not actually being applied for. The applicant's agent is happy that the description of development be changed to station caravans and then a permission be given for 30, and then the permission also include a condition that it should only be occupied between the period 9th of February to the 10th of January effectively in any calendar year. And just back and hark back to the considerations. these variation of condition applications you need to look at the condition itself that was attached and the reason for it, and then assess the merits or otherwise of that extended change period. So on that basis, Chairman, the proposal is recommendation to approve.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rogers. Can we now hear from Chelsea with the representations that have been received? And of course, we should only hear from representations that were received by 8:30 a.m. on Tuesday, the 7th of July.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The first comment is from Adam Armstrong. As permanent residents and lovers of Ringstead for over 30 years, we are very concerned about the proposal to alter the long-established limit of 7 months residency to as long as 11 months at the Creek Caravan Park. This decisively introduces the possibility of permanent residence at as many as 30 homes in a hitherto rare and desperately preserved site of pristine beauty, an AONB on the World Heritage Jurassic Coast. An added concern reported to us recently has been the current distressing conflict within the site ownership. 49% of shareholders/leaseholders wish the site to remain as it is, but 51%, comprising the Fishers' share ownership, would like to convert caravans to chalets. Indeed, long-standing leaseholders, 30+ years, have been told simply that their lease may be terminated with no reason given or response to emails. Possibly the planning committee are unaware of this situation. It certainly throws the application into a different light. Is this sudden desire for a time extension, and a short extension to 9 months is surely enough, truly to enhance the current conditions, or what we greatly fear is a step to further far more invasive development? Moreover, this disturbing planning permission was sought during the COVID crisis, when few, if any, people were permitted to read the displayed application. This is surely not right. This is a valuable site, potentially of great private profit. It also directly adjoins National Trust land. The preservation of Ringstead, a place of such joy to all people, especially from Dorset, but also from as far as the US or Australia, is surely, in the committee's opinion, far more valuable. The next is from Nicholas and Virginia Henry. We wish to add our voice to the already existing objections, which set out admirably the reasons why this proposal is unnecessary and detrimental to the fabric of Ringstead. Ringstead provides a rare place of sanctuary and quiet in southern England. The current occupancy of the caravans allows for affordable holidays for families. 11 months occupancy allows for permanent dwelling for those who can afford such luxury, especially in the light of the proposed plans to place chalets on the site. There has been, to our intimate knowledge of Ringstead, no application notice in a visible public site, and we have not heard these plans from the caravan site owners. Therefore, no application can surely be granted until an application notice is placed in clear vision for the public. There is certainly no parking for 30 cars to the north of the caravan site. There is, to repeat the major objections to this plan, insufficient infrastructure in Ringstead to accommodate this plan. We have lived in close proximity to Ringstead village for 30+ years and wish to see it remain as a refuge for people who seek an escape from the commercialisation of other seaside destinations in Dorset, England, the UK and indeed the world. The next is from Tim Wallace. I am concerned that this important application has not received the appropriate time for public scrutiny. I am disappointed that the recommendation to approve this application has been made without the opposing arguments having sufficient time to be heard. The Parish Council did not oppose this on 8th of June 2020 because they had not received any comments, simply because no one knew about it. They have informed me that they now oppose it. The application has been carefully crafted to appear that nothing will change on the site. As a result, few of the statutory bodies have commented. I do not see how any reasonable assessment can be made on such questions as the effects on infrastructure, roads and highways, residential amenities, ecosystems and the local environment without knowing where this site is going with its further 4 months. A quiet summer-only seasonal caravan site, with lettings currently restricted to 4 out of the 30 caravans, is a very different prospect to a site of 30 luxury all-year-round lodges being heavily marketed and let throughout the year. Surely, such intense operations are best suited to less obtrusive sites that can be properly screened and do not dominate the local community as this no doubt will. This is a perfectly profitable business that has served shareholders and leaseholders well for many years that now wishes to maximise its profitability at the expense of residents, infrastructure and the environment. In my opinion, the economic benefits to the local community from this will be overshadowed by the damage it will cause to our small hamlet. The next is from Sarah Wallace. A recommendation summary by the Council recommending approval to the application contains an amendment to the plan statement from occupancy 9th of February to 10th of January the following year. Section 73 of the Town and Country Plan Act 1990 would indicate to me that in changing the conditions under which the 1962 permission was approved, it is enabling approval of future plan application. The next is from Jane Birchett. There are some inaccuracies in the plan application in that the applicant states that the site cannot be seen from a public road, footpath, bridleway or other public land. The site is not only starkly visible from the beach, but is seen along the southwestern coastal path when walking in an easterly direction from the Ringsted car park. It remains visible as the path rises towards the right nose. On the site plan from the applicant, the public footpath S34/19 that crosses the site to a stile in the eastern hedge boundary is not drawn. There has been a failure of communication as regards to the application. We were only notified via an article in the Dorset Echo on 16th of June. The public notification went up in the caravan site's own notice board during lockdown and was not seen by any of the Ringsted residents due to the position of the notice board on private land and in that it was placed amongst other posters. An important neighbour is the NT and they were not alerted. It seems that there is a deliberate attempt to minimise scrutiny of the proposed changes. It is also noteworthy that many caravan owners do not know of these proposals. A misappropriation has been made that no one was concerned because there was no prior comments until after Trevor Bevan's article in the Echo. On the contrary, there are many people worried about the implications of this proposal, and there has been consternation at the lack of time for a fuller response. The directors of the caravan park are less than transparent about their intentions for the caravan site. They seem to want to drop conditions that give the LPA an oversight. They want to extend the occupancy to 48 weeks of the year, 36% more time than previously, and all present caravan owners lose their leases from October 2020 and have to remove their vans. While on the face of it, these are regarded as minor conditions in the proposal for residents. The clearing of the site of caravans and felling trees indicates to us that this is paving the way for a substantial commercialisation with scant regard to the unique nature of Ringsted. In my estimation, 48 weeks of occupancy of a caravan site directly positioned on the Dorset coast with no respite for the residents, no dormancy for the natural environment, light intrusion into dark skies as well as traffic disturbance is too long and risks changing Ringstead's rural identity as a secluded tranquil hamlet loved by residents and walkers of the southwestern coast path. We urge you to decline this proposal. The next is Debbie Reddin on behalf of the applicant. The Creek Caravan site is a long-established business that currently operates under an outdated plan permission granted in 1962. Ringsted Caravan Company Limited was established in 1978 and the site was family-owned and run since the 1920s. The family and company have always supported local residents, landowners, businesses, visitors and the council. This application, made under Section 73 of the Town and Country Plan Act, seeks to update the 1962 permission with the removal and variation of conditions. But as is a requirement of Section 73, it does not fundamentally change the extant permission. The extended season requested would not allow permanent residents of the caravans. The site would continue to operate under site licence requirements and all caravans would be within the legal definition. No physical changes or building operations are proposed and therefore there will be no change to the visual impact on the surrounding area. No change is proposed to the access and parking arrangements of the site. In reality, the site may not be fully occupied during these additional months, and the impact of some additional traffic and visitors would not be seriously detrimental. The longer season would cater for short breaks, which are popular at these times, and although other facilities at Ringsted may not be open, additional visitors would provide some economic benefit to the wider area. This is a reflection of modern patterns of tourism. Other sites in the area have increased the length of season over recent years, and in some cases, no seasonal limit at all is imposed. The influx of visitors to Ringsted in the summer undoubtedly puts pressure on the area, but this application will not change the situation at peak holiday times. Existing infrastructure and services provide adequately for the area. The proposed longer season for occupation of the existing caravans would be when visitor numbers are lower and therefore would not put unacceptable pressure on services and facilities. No objection is raised by the Parish Council, Natural England or Highways Authority. The Jurassic Coast Trust has understandable concerns regarding coastal erosion and protection, which will need to be considered in any future coastal management proposals. With no physical change and only amendments to conditions being considered, this application does not affect coastal erosion. The variation and removal of conditions will not make any physical change to the site and will not allow permanent residence. The extended season would provide added security for the future of the business and support the local economy. This would not have a significant adverse effect on local residents and would be in accordance with plan policy. Committee members are asked to support the proposal and grant planning permission as recommended. That's all the comments. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Chelsea. Mr. Rogers, do you have any comments to make?
I'll just make a comment.
Those representations.
I'll just make a comment, Chairman, on the publicity requirements for this. You'll be aware that since COVID-19, planning officers working from home have had great difficulty in being able to carry out their work duty of erecting site notices. And not only this one, but many, many others, we've relied on applicants and agents to put the site notice up, take a photograph of it, send it back to us with a date indicating when it was done. And that was exactly what was carried out here. We neighbour notify when we deal with applications of this ilk to immediate adjoining neighbours that have got a red line with the site. So in this instance, we consulted the immediate neighbour to the west. We've had accusations or allegations that that's a holiday home. Well, you know, what can I do about that? We have a duty to notify adjoining owners and occupiers, and if they are holiday home owners, then we've carried out our statutory role. In terms of land to the east that you can see is unoccupied, and we as a council never have any knowledge as to who owns green fields, etc., which is why the site notice is pertinent, and that's why the site notice was erected. It seems that as a result of the Echo receiving and looking at various planning proposals that they are made aware of, they ran a piece in the Echo talking of this particular application, and it was that prompted a number of other residents to look further into the merits or otherwise of the proposal, and they have now looked at the application and made their comments, which are now before you in terms of the update sheet, Chairman, including the parish council now raising objections, whereas previously they didn't, but that was on the basis that, well, I think they were largely reflecting at that time the views of local residents, and of course that's now changed.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Can we hear now, please, from Councillor Nick Ireland?
Thank you, Chairman. I've just got a couple of points to make and then a question, well, several questions actually. Mr. Rogers has just mentioned the site notice. I wasn't going to bring that up, but it's been alluded that it was only put on private land. So maybe he can confirm that, because if it was, clearly the residents of the area wouldn't see it. One of the things that I should probably point out is I'm actually the ward member for the area, and my council where I live is Osmington Parish Council. We weren't consulted on this application, so I've no predetermination there. But the boundary between Owen Parish Council and Osmington Parish Council, if you look at the map in front of us, it's essentially a line down from the car park, and many of the residents of Ringstead are actually in the neighbouring council area, i.e. Osmington, and yet Osmington Parish Council wasn't notified, and yet given the location and the way Ringstead is a small hamlet effectively, you know, I think we should have done. That's something to take away. But the thing I wanted to concentrate on in the report, I think it's paragraph 14.2. It says that basically the applicant wants to essentially regularise their opening period with what's existing locally on other sites, and yet the report doesn't go into detail as to what they are. And so I've done a bit of an investigation. So if you go to the west, the next place is Osmington Mills, which most of you will probably know. There's 2 caravan sites there, although one is chalets now, although apparently they come under the same rule. So that's Waterside. That closes for 2 months, from January the 15th to March the 15th. The other is Streamside, whose opening period is essentially the same as the one at Ringstead is now, i.e. they closed November through to March. A bit further afield, if you go down to Weymouth and Preston, you've got Seaview and Weymouth Bay. They also close for 2 months, January 15th to March 15th. Bowley is down at another Waterside site, they're the same. So I'm just slightly confused at why we're happy to go along with just 1 month closing. I'm well aware that many of these sites now are essentially residential because they don't have holiday period, restrictions. So essentially anybody can stay there for the period they're open. And I have a friend who actually lives in Weymouth Bay. She stays there for 10 months of the year and then decamps to a rented accommodation for 2 months. So they are essentially becoming residential, which I don't think is what the intention of the restrictions. The restrictions put in place were to stop that. And I'm a bit worried that if we just reduce it to 1 month, it will eventually become a residential site, and people just go away on holiday skiing for a month or something, because if they can afford a place down there, they probably can afford to do that. I think we should be looking at what's around and restricting the opening to at least what the local caravan parks are, i.e. at least 2 months. That's my comment.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ireland. Councillor Kate Weller.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Listening to all of the comments, Mr. Rogers can confirm this, but we aren't being asked to deliberate on what the site owners might do in the future. That's not within our remit. It's not within our remit to have any say on what their conditions might be in the future, or indeed are now in terms of their leasehold. What we're being asked is simply, do we think that the time that people can stay in their caravans should be extended, or do we think it shouldn't be? That I say, Mr. Rogers can confirm that. Speculation of what might happen further down the line is not in discussion here.
Can we hear from Mr. Crowther, the legal officer?
Chairman, if I may just put in before Mr. Crowther.
Yes, of course, Mr. Rogers. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, Councillor Weller is absolutely spot on. That's all I'll say.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Crowther, do you have any comments to make?
Chairman, no, that's the position. It's the proposal before you know what the owners may or may not intend to do.
Okay. Members, do we have any other comments? Do we have any proposals?
Yes, Chairman, it's Councillor Nick Ireland.
Councillor Ireland,
I probably need a bit of advice first, but so can I find out, is it possible to amend the application to change the condition for the opening period? If so, I would like to propose that that's what we do. If not, I would like to propose that we reject it.
Okay.
Chairman, I can answer that question for you. Darren Rogers again. Yeah, that Councillor Nick Ireland is perfectly, as far as I am aware, unless Phil Crowther says that what I'm about to say is wrong. If members are of the view that the extended period as is recommended is inappropriate, but Councillor Ireland's proposition is acceptable, then that's entirely a committee judgment to be made. But I think that what would be worth underpinning that is explaining the planning reasons why that's acceptable, and one of those planning reasons might be that given other caravan parks having similar time periods, that would justify consistency of approach.
Okay. We'll hear next from Councillor Sarah Williams, if you don't mind. Hello, Sarah.
Sorry, I was just unmuting myself. Yeah, just a couple of quick questions for Darren. One is, can you show me where the actual parking is to the north of the site? Because when you look at the close-up photograph, I can't actually see where the parking area is for the 30 cars.
Well, that's because I think each of the site owners or the occupiers park on the grassed area, perhaps next to each of these caravans, because there doesn't look as if there's
in the design and access statement, they said that there was only parking next to the caravan for unloading and loading. So
right, well, it must be in this location there, then on Ringstead Car Park. Can you see on the screen?
Yeah. And my other comment is, have you got any comments on the Jurassic Coast Trust's fears of coastal erosion with more use of the land?
Yes, it's the answer as he set out in the report. There's not likely to be any consequential adverse impacts by extending the time period, bearing in mind that this is a well-established caravan park and has been since 1962.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the sort of movement of cars in wet weather, bad weather periods, whether that could actually impact on the site and the erosion.
Okay, we'll let Mr. Rogers think about that. Councillor David Gray.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like an answer to Councillor Ireland's question about site notices. The site notice in this case only being on private land, which then precludes people from actually reading it. What's the councillor's view on that, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, given the problems associated with COVID-19, should I say, there have been, we've been reliant on applicants and agents to put them in a place that members of the public can see it. If this has been put on the caravan, as we think it has, the caravan notice board, technically, yes, it's on private land, but anyone could still walk up to that private land area and have a look at the notice board without having been told to, oh, you're trespassing, etc., etc. But the whole point of the publicity of the site notice and neighbour notification letters is to alert members of the public to proposals. And one could argue that although a site notice and a neighbour notification letter was sent out in accordance with our current practices, and therefore we've met the current statutory requirements as part of this application, the Dorset Echo have done a damn good job of alerting other members of the public to the proposal to have their say in the planning application process as well. That's led to the representations that are before you in terms of your update sheet.
Chair, can I come back?
Yes, David.
Not for now, but I think probably the council needs to look at, the instructions for, if we're going to continue to allow developers to put notices up, we just need to tighten those rules. And the other thing I would say is, again, Councillor Ireland's point about neighbouring parish councils, it doesn't seem right to me that we did not inform the neighbouring parish council when it's very, very close. So I think we should need to look at the instructions. Perhaps Philip can take that away and look at tightening those up. Thank you.
Yes, I would like to hear from Philip Crowther again, but before we do that, Councillor Ireland, your proposal with respect to dates, can you just clarify what your proposal is with respect to dates?
Yeah, I think that we accept the application amended to the condition that it's closed between January the 15th and March the 15th, which seemed to bring it in line with most of the local caravan parks.
So 15th of January to March the 15th.
Correct.
Okay. And do I take it that Pete Barrow is happy to second that?
Yes, I'm happy to second that. So
Pete is happy to second that. We'll now hear from Philip Crowther before we vote. We don't want to forget you, Philip, so we want to hear about site notices and anything that you think is pertinent before we go to vote.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to pick up on the point about what you can do on this application, essentially, Darren's answered the question. The longer answer is that because it's an application to vary conditions, you can approve the application as applied for. You can impose such other conditions that as you think relevant, or if you don't think that should happen and the permissions should stay the same, then you refuse the application. So essentially, you are entitled to proceed with Councillor Ireland's proposal and put that to the vote.
Okay.
In terms of publicity, I'd need a couple of minutes just to check the specific statutory requirements.
I can tell you what those are, Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Rogers.
Well, when we deal with a planning application of this ilk, we are supposed to either erect a site notice or neighbour notify. I'll come back to the point. Anna Lee, Head of Development Management, and Mike Garrity have produced a document with regards to the need for site visits and asking applicants and agents to help us out with regards to those. That's happened in this particular case, not setting aside the issue associated with concerns about the ability to read the site notice while certain members of the public were shielding during COVID-19, but the government have told us that planning doesn't stop during COVID-19, and that's why we've sought the help of applicants and agents. So a site notice has been erected, neighbours have been notified, and as I said, the wider publicity of the application has been made known through the Dorset Echo article.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rogers. We will now proceed to the vote. So
Sorry,
this
Chair.
is
Sorry, Chair. Sorry to interrupt. I'm not sure that I'm happy with that answer. It doesn't answer the specific question of whether we put a condition on site notices not being on private land, therefore in some cases excluding members of the public from going on to private land, and that's what I really wanted to understand.
right. I think what we'll do, we'll take that up with legal, and we'll take that up with the planning portfolio holder. David, do you think that's a good idea?
I think it's worth taking away. Yes, thank you.
Yes, good. Okay, so we'll now move to the what I'm going to call the Nick Ireland proposal of closed dates 15th of January to 15th of March, if I have that correct. Do I have that correct, Phil?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so alphabetically, Peter Barrow, are you in favour?
Yeah, in favour.
Kelvin Clayton?
Yeah, I'm in favour of that.
Sue Cocking?
In favour.
Jean Dunseith?
In favour.
Thank you. Councillor David Gray?
In favour.
Councillor Nick Ireland for the formalities?
In favour.
Councillor David Shortell?
I'm in favour, Chairman.
Councillor Sarah Williams?
In favour.
Councillor Kate Weller?
For.
I'm also in favour, and for the formalities, Councillor Louis O'Leary is not in attendance. Okay, thank you all very much. So we will now move on to item 5C, WP/1700836/FUL, land northwest side of Wessex roundabout, Radipole Lane, Blandford, appeal against non-determination. And I would like to hear, please, from Anne Collins, and then I anticipate hearing from Phil Crowther, the legal officer. Hello, good afternoon, Anne.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Can you see the first slide?
Yes, WP/1700836.
Thank you, Chair. So members will recall this application came to committee in February, along with a separate reserved matters application for housing on an adjacent site, and also a report regarding viability in respect of affordable housing. At the February committee, members deferred the determination of the application, asking for greater information or amended plans with respect to provision, width and location of pavements and cycleways as part of the access to both sides of the access, and to give further consideration to the safety of the access and parking. Now, since that committee in February, no additional information has actually been provided by the applicant, either in terms of written submissions or amended plans, and they have now submitted an appeal to the Planning Inspectorate against non-determination of the application. So it is now no longer within the local planning authority's jurisdiction to determine this appeal and to determine the application, and the application will be determined by the Planning Inspectorate. However, in making submissions to the Planning Inspectorate, we are required to indicate whether we would have supported or refused the application if we had reached a decision upon it. Sorry, Chair, just having problems with my slides a minute, bear with me. So the application site is this area outlined in red here on the screen, At the time in February, members also considered an application for reserved matters for housing in the area outlined in blue. But the application we're looking at today is only for vehicle access, ponds and landscaping in this red area here. To give context, this is the Wessex roundabout. The area outlined in green is the police site with the custody suite, etc. And the access up to the football stadium comes in here currently. And beyond that, the road provides an access into the police site, the golf course up here, and the Chickrell substation and distribution centre up to the north. Members will also note that it is a bit of a strange one because we've got a full application in here for the access, and then a separate reserve matters was submitted for the housing. And this is because when outline plan permission was granted for the development of the adjacent site, part of the site was in the area covered by West Dorset District Council and part of it covered by Weymouth and Portland. And this little green hatched line here shows that division that existed then. So the housing site was within the area covered by West Dorset and the access was in the area covered by Weymouth and Portland. And that is why we've ended up with these two separate applications, one for the reserve matters and a full application for the access. So a more detailed slide. This is showing the application area in here in red, new access coming in. So this is the existing access into the stadium site here. So they're effectively just moving it to the south by about 10 metres. The access would come in here. To the north of it, they're proposing a retention pond, and also to the south, and they are effectively to deal with the housing proposal on the adjacent site. They also propose additional landscaping and planting around the entrance to the site. Members will see, and as was discussed at the previous meeting, that the proposal shows a pavement or footway coming in on the south of the access, and something here to the north, but there's sort of no continuation on the south. So as you come in, you'd have to cross the road to get to the north side to continue on the pavement. And that was considered at that last committee and was a subject of discussion. This shows the red line boundary is actually in this area here. So the actual access works are on highway land. It's been confirmed by legal that highways do control the land here in order to form the access in. This is the existing access into the stadium site, and this is the proposed access coming in here. And the blue dotted line shows the extent of the visibility splays and the fact that the visibility splays can be obtained within land controlled by the highway authority. This slide is intended to show how, if the appeal was not successful for the housing on this site, or if the appeal was successful but the permission was never implemented, this shows how the new access that's proposed would just come in and link to the existing tarmac area. So this is an existing tarmac area within the stadium grounds, which is used currently for parking, etc. And it just shows that it wouldn't actually impact on that parking, because whereas the access comes in currently down to there, it would now just curve in and come up and meet the parking area. So it doesn't create additional parking, but it doesn't also result in a loss of any parking should an access permission be implemented in respect of the existing stadium. Some photos. So this is the existing access into the site. The proposed access would be immediately to the south, and the land to the north of it would form a retention pond, as would land to the south, and there'd be additional planting in around here. You can see there to the north the existing police site and their access in. There is one existing dwelling not currently occupied in quite a poor condition here. Obviously, if the appeal was successful for housing site on this land, that house would actually go because it would form part of that development site. But equally, if the house remained, it's considered the new access would have an acceptable impact on that dwelling. Photo of the existing, see the Wessex roundabout here, this is the existing access in, the new access would be immediately to the south of it in this area here. Again, you can see the existing access in here on the left, and there's the police station and site on the right. So standing now, so I was going to go up to Radipole, this is the existing access in. You can see a number of signs, etc. there at the moment, and the proposed access would be in this area here, bringing it closer to the stadium roundabout. And looking back, there's the spur road off and the existing access in. And just coming up further up the hill, looking back with the police site in the background, and the access would come in this area here. So key issues considered in my report. The officer recommendation in February was to approve, and the officer's view hasn't changed in that respect. As I said, we wouldn't actually be approving or refusing it today. Members would just be indicating whether, if they'd reached a decision, whether they would have approved or refused it. If members were indicating they would have approved the application, then I've listed a number of suggested conditions here, running to 18 conditions in total, as detailed in my report. Obviously, if members were indicating they would have refused the permission, then members should be providing a reason as normal as to why that would be the case. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Criver, Phil, would you like to comment before we hear from Nick Ireland?
Sorry, Chairman, you were muted there. Did you want me to?
Yes, Phil.
Did you want me?
Yes, do you just mind commenting on members participating today?
Of course, thank you, Chairman. So the question for members is, having considered this application before, is to whether you consider that you've predetermined the application or not. In doing so, you need to look not only at whether you believe that you've predetermined, but whether a reasonable person who knew all the facts would think that you have. It's important to say that it's perfectly legitimate for you to have a predisposition towards a particular decision and take part properly. So that essentially means that you're erring. You're entitled to be erring one way, but once you reach the point that you've made your mind up, then that would be predetermination. So simply because you were considering this application at a previous committee and were in the process of forming a view, then my advice is that you're able to participate and vote. If during that meeting you had formed your view and therefore have a closed mind, then my view would be that is predetermination and that you should not take part. But as I say, it's a matter for each of you to decide whether you actually have predetermined based on what you've said previously about the application and your views. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Criver. Councillor Nick Ireland.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. In response to Phil Crowther's comments, I think it's a bit of fantasy to suggest that none of us had made our minds up, to be honest, that there was a reason we deferred it in the end, because it was obviously we were going down one route. But to get to the point in front of us right now, as I highlighted last time, if you look at the plans as suggested, there is no access for cycles at all. The proposed footpath is too narrow for cycles. And as I pointed out also last time, that all the access is essentially from the roundabout direction of the roundabout. Nobody's going to be accessing from the police station side. And the current design requires anybody on foot or cycle, and you shouldn't be cycling on the pavement anyway, so we basically cross the entrance road, because the footpath continues on the north side. I think it's north if it's the right orientation, but if you look at the map in front of us, it makes sense. So you're actually crossing the entrance. Everybody has to cross the entrance. So on the basis that there isn't any cycle provision and it doesn't take into account pedestrian safety or access, I'm going to propose that we refuse it. The reason for proposal are under MP squared F, paragraph 91 brackets A, paragraph 110 brackets A and C, and also under the local plan EMV 11. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ireland. I do invite other people to speak. Anne Collins, can I just ask you, 10.2, under 10.2, we had the thoughts of the Dorset Police Crime Prevention Design Advisor. Has there been any amendment between that previous meeting? Has there been any update? Any further comments between that day and this? Or do those comments stand in entirety without amendment?
They stand in entirety without amendment, Chair. We've had no further communication with the police since that date.
But you would agree with me that there was a clear concern that this entrance, this sole and only entrance, was perceived to be too close to the roundabout, having read that text.
That was their concern, yes.
And that is a serious concern, I would argue.
Yes, although not a concern that seems to be shared by the Highway Authority, Chair.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So, members, do we have any further comments? Peter Barrow.
This causes some confusion. There's a whole issue of predetermination, which I find confusing. And also this application may well be fine for the current, if the housing doesn't go ahead. But if the housing does go ahead, then all of the comments that Nick Island has made are going to become very relevant. And also there's the whole issue of this is going to be the single access to that housing, which is onto a very busy roundabout, which doesn't have good crossing facilities at the moment, and is a school route for children at Budmouth. So for those reasons, I'm happy to second Nick Island's proposal.
Do we have any comments? Any comments, further comments, members? So we have a proposal from Councillor Ireland, and we have a seconder. Before we go to the vote, Mr. Crowther, do you have anything to add?
Chairman, no.
Nothing else to add. So for the formalities, Mr. Barrow, obviously you are in favour of this proposal from Councillor Ireland.
I am, yes.
Councillor Clayton.
Yeah, in favour.
Councillor Sue Cocking.
In favour.
Councillor Jean Dunseith. Councillor Dunseith.
I have withdrawn from this.
You have withdrawn, yes, just to clarify for the public record that you have withdrawn on this matter.
Yes.
Councillor David Gray.
In favour.
For the formalities, Councillor Ireland.
In favour.
For the record, Councillor Louis O'Leary is not in attendance. Councillor David Shortell.
I withdrawn, Chairman.
You have withdrawn as well. Thank you again for the record. Councillor Sarah Williams.
In favour.
Councillor Kate Weller.
In favour.
And for the record, I am also in favour. So this proposal has been seconded, and that has been unanimously voted through by those taking part in the vote. Okay, so we will now adjourn the meeting until the afternoon session, which will be commencing at 2 o'clock. If you do want to communicate with me in the meantime, do use the chat box.